Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Market Open. We are live. It is Tuesday, July 21st. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We've got a little bit of a rebound here happening in the pre-market that is more greeny green than not. And I think the goal for today is going to be hoping that it can stay. You've got a couple of updates that we've got to talk about in regards to earnings that are relatively positive. You've got some AI news that also tends to be relatively positive. Yesterday, we had a lot of different AI updates, whether it was the IREN data center deal, the HUT data center deal, the Microsoft AMD partnership. All of those things led the market to be green, but it didn't really lead the market to hold on to that green. And I don't know if today's a little bit of a delayed reaction, or maybe it's reacting to some of the stuff that happened with the Kospi last night. It was up about 3%. Some of the memory companies in Japan were about up 5 to 6%. It's helping the U.S. market, and particularly it's helping the U.S. tech stocks and high beta stocks in this market. Micron, back above 900, up about 6% in the pre-market. Nebius, up 7%, 195. There was that filing after hours that NVIDIA owns functionally 9.3% of the company. It's not necessarily new news. They got the 21 million warrants that gives them that overall 9.3% stake back in March. It was just kind of reported yesterday through different SEC filings, although it was already known. But that headline, along with the broader momentum around high beta in the pre-market, leading Nebius to get a nice 6.83% jump right there. Rocket Lab, that's up 2.5%. CoreWeave, that is up 4%. CoreWeave was up 8% yesterday, gave it all back. So it's nice to see CoreWeave get at least half of that momentum back right in the pre-market. Oracle's up 1%. SK Hynix is up 6%. Hut 8 Mining up another 3%. IREN up another 4%. Cypher up 2%. I mean, you're seeing some of that sentiment shift come back to these data center names. The problem is I think everyone is a bit scared because every time you have a nice green pre-market, by the market open or by 10:30, you start to see a lot of this stuff fade away. So today's going to be an important test to see, can we actually hold on to some of these gains? Do the dip buyers actually come in? Do they hold? Or do people end up just trading these names and they end up selling off a little bit lower? Reddit right there, that's up 1.3%. Marvell's up 5.6%. Marvell 170 to 205. Not too bad. I know it's down from 330, but still pretty big rebound. Lumentum is also above $800 as that is up 5.3%. What is down? Well, your hyperscalers, because they're going to be the ones that are spending the CapEx. So the same kind of story applies, that they end up losing some momentum if the CapEx beneficiaries get momentum. Google right there is down in the pre-market. Microsoft is down. Tesla took a really ugly hit yesterday. It's recovering just a little bit right there, but just above 371, was down below 370 yesterday. SpaceX also fell below 120. That is now recovering a little bit, 122 in the pre-market. But if the broader CapEx trade is intact, one could argue, hey, maybe Google's earnings are getting previewed based on the momentum we're seeing in the pre-market. And if Google comes out and reaffirms, if not re-accelerates their commitment to spend on CapEx, many of these names theoretically could get re-rated back to where they were a month ago. Maybe not all the way back to all-time highs, but obviously it would be very positive if a big Mag 7 comes out and says they're going to spend a lot of money, which we'll find out tomorrow as Google has earnings, and that'll be a big one for all of us to cover. All right, let's get into it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. David, I'm Benny. Erwin, what's up? What's up? Rick Huang, Otis, thank you for being here. June, good morning. We do have some tariffs to talk about. The news broke last night on the market close, and, well, the tariffs are back. So we will talk about the tariffs. Basent was live today. We'll listen to what Basent said about some of these Chinese open source models and justifying the tariffs. Eva, what's up? Dominic, what's up? Kane, Thomas, Blake, good morning, good morning. Daniel Peffer, thank you for being here. As long as no one has a anime character in their name, I think today is going to be totally fine. I think today will be totally fine, dude. I got roasted so bad. I watched the clip from yesterday. I looked at the chat. It was so bad. The worst part was when I was like, wait, so what's the main character's name in Naruto? That's when I think people lost it. That's when I think people were like, okay, I'm done. I wasn't range bait. I saw a bunch of comments like he's troll. Like, if you've been part of the channel, there's been one time where I've sophisticatedly trolled everybody, and that's when I said Metallica was called Metallica. And like, I can admit I was trolling. Like that's kind of pushing it. Metallica, are you serious? But yesterday was not trolling. Like, I'm not going to troll with that many people there at it was like 9:50, it was in the heat of the market commentary. I thought I would make a joke. The joke didn't work out. I moved on. I realized not only did the joke did not work out, I completely ruined the premise or the punchline or the setup for the joke. That wasn't to rage bait, trust me. If I was going to rage bait like that, it would be towards the end of the show. It would be more relaxed. It wouldn't be in the heat of market action. So that was real, and I'm ashamed of it, but we are moving on. All right, let's get into it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Tariffs. So let's start off with that. So it was funny because Trump and Carney were sitting with each other at the World Cup, laughing, talking. That's some of the footage that I saw. Obviously, Trump had some comments before the World Cup about Canada not being able to control their wildfires, which did affect the northeast part of the United States in terms of air quality. And even after all that laughing and talking with Carney at the World Cup, Trump ends up putting a 50% tariff on a variety of different goods coming from Canada. The funniest part about this was it is going to be ranging from wine to cement to hockey sticks. And I feel like they put hockey sticks in there to send a message of just like, hey, we don't care what it is that's, coming from Canada or matters in Canada. We want to put a 50% tariff on this. So this is really interesting because not only do we have a ton of Iran uncertainty, you had some level of news yesterday that there was going to be a potential brokering of a framework for a 10-day ceasefire based on the Pakistanis and the Qataris. We then started strikes 7 hours later after that news broke. And guess what? Oil, why not? 84.14. We are trying to get back up to 85. That's up 2% right here. Brent crude is above 90 for the first time in a couple of weeks. So you've got crude, you got WTI crude and Brent crude starting to get back to levels that we haven't seen in about a month, even though you had these like ceasefire framework negotiations come out yesterday. And now you have tariffs that are being imposed. The reason for this is because Canada is being hostile towards America's alcohol exports. So apparently it wasn't because of their wildfires, although Trump is upset about the wildfires, but it's more because of their hostility against alcohol. And as a result of that, we get another level of uncertainty that's entering the market, which ends up being tariffs. And these are 50% tariffs across the board on a variety of these products. So it's a bit confusing because I don't know if the market's going to react to it. I don't know if the market cares. I don't know when this is going to go away. Theoretically, maybe it doesn't last for a long time, but it is happening. And, you have a Trump regime that is kind of leaning back on some of the tariffs, as Reuters reported this morning that Trump is preparing a new round of tariffs on a variety of different things. Donald Trump is reportedly preparing a new round of tariffs on dozens of countries ahead of the expiration of the current 10% global tariff this week. That is the 10% global tariff that they had to put in place after the Supreme Court overturned the initial reciprocal tariffs that they had. According to the Financial Times, the administration is considering keeping the 10% rate for many countries while pursuing legal avenues to impose higher duties on others. I think that's also probably why the timing of these Canadian tariffs ended up happening yesterday, the way that they're happening. I think the excuse of alcohol, the excuse of not, dealing with your wildfires coincided with the expiration of those 10% global tariffs. And now, we're doing 50% on Canada, which I don't even fully know if we're going to be allowed to hold on to those 50% global tariffs. So do they affect the broader market? I don't think so, because again, this market is driven by CapEx and AI sentiment more than anything, and oil prices. But the problem with tariffs, once again, is that if oil prices are going up and we're putting tariffs on products and those products are then putting the cost of those tariffs on consumers, you potentially get a little bit of inflation. And that inflation in this market with a 10-year that is awfully getting close to 4.7 is not something that we need, given oil prices continue to go higher. In fact, the 10-year is yielding such a small amount relative to inflation, even though it's a high amount relative to its historical average, that even Jamie Dimon came out today and he said, I don't understand why anyone would buy treasuries. He said, quote, even if inflation was 2%, the 10-year bond should probably be at 4.5 to 4%, and the short rate should be at 3.3, and they're almost there today. So I don't understand what the upside is, even if you think inflation could go to 2%. And by the way, it's been over 3% for almost 5 years. So theoretically, this 10-year at 4.5 should be, if inflation's at 2, that's where you actually get an equity risk premium on bonds, but you're not getting that. And inflation, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think it's going to 2% anytime soon. I mean, we were at 3.5 last month. The closest we got to was 2.4% in October of 2024. And then, by January, it completely shot back up. So the idea of treasuries being a better place to park your money versus many other assets, equities, Bitcoin, gold, it's hard to believe. Having said that, if that yield keeps creeping up because of inflation problems and, the 10 years leading 4.7, 4.8, you're going to get a lot of people that have more substantial amounts of money that are like, if I can get a free 5% without taking any risk, that'd be a better thing to do. The problem is, that would take away money from the stock market and obviously not be good for equities. So you've got inflation potentially heating up with this tariff stuff. You've got oil prices objectively heating up. I mean, we haven't seen 85 since the Sunday futures. It went down to 81 yesterday. So if we open and those crude prices are still above 84, it's $5 away from 90, and the price of gas is already at $4 nationally again. So I just wonder at what point, does Trump step in and say, all right, we really do need a ceasefire. We need to release something from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which we only have 43 days left of supply, because if we start seeing oil prices the way we saw in March, I don't think the broader street is going to be excited about that. So those are some of the updates we have in terms of the Iran war. Then you had Bessent come out this morning, and he gave us another update in terms of what the U.S. is doing with some of the frozen assets for the IRGC.
Most, if not all, of their capability to rebuild, and then we moved on to what we call economic fury, and that's a 1-2 punch. It's the blockade, and then what we're doing at Treasury, and we are tracking these accounts all over the world. We froze a crypto wallet linked to the IRGC the other day, about $130 million. We have found the money man for the Ayatollah, and we are tracking the Ayatollah's properties around the world. We hope to soon be able to print his $100 million plus properties and show the addresses. And we're preserving this money for the American people, but most of all, we are constricting the regime. Their currency has collapsed. It is at an all-time low versus the dollar. It's in free fall. And we think the inflation rate is upwards of 180% and destroyed most, if not all, of their capability.
So they seized the crypto wallet. 130 million was in that crypto wallet from the Iranians. And once again, it doesn't seem like that's de-escalating if they're going to be seizing more assets from the Iranians. The Iranians probably going to be upset about that. And then this is what Bessent said about what China is doing in regards to oil based on the Iran conflict.
Iranian oil, the Chinese in general, because of the prices and because they have a very large strategic petroleum reserve, have dropped their purchases of crude over the past few months by about 40%, and that's directly pressuring the Iranian regime. And we put the blockade back, and I tell you, the blockade is powerful financially, but I think it's also very powerful psychologically. It cuts Iran off from the rest of the world, and we also have the ability to interdict the Iranian dark fleet once they are out in the Pacific.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're going to be watching all of that. Secretary, I want to move on to AI.
So there are your prices at the pump right there. $4 for regular, and you have $4.90 for premium. Obviously, getting back above $4 psychologically is not the best either, but you've got Bessent kind of making these claims that the Chinese are struggling in regards to importing oil, and that the Iranians are struggling in regards to the level assets that they were already a rumored 20 billion of assets that are frozen from the United States on Iran. Now, in terms of AI, Bessent had some comments around the Chinese models, which have obviously flipped the sentiment in regards to some of the compute constraints we have, even though the compute constraints should get even worse with these Chinese models. He said, China models need to be held to the same standard. You can't use counterfeit goods. We are creating competitors. The question is, are China models using stolen materials? And we're going to be looking at China models in the coming days and weeks. I think there is a very good chance, I don't know if it's 100%, but I think there's a good chance that the U.S. imposes some level of regulations to meaningfully ban or stop the proliferation of Chinese open source models, or just Chinese models in general. And it feels like there's a lot of different regulatory capture that's coming from a variety of different mechanisms in order to stop this. Now, I think at some level, open models are kind of inevitable, and I don't think the government's going to be able to actually get rid of them or ban them. I think there's also going to be a lot of U.S. companies that, if the Chinese companies are banned, that end up creating open source models, which ends up still hurting Anthropic and OpenAI. But I mean, this whole CapEx trade is contingent on companies continuing to spend, which again, even with the open source proliferation, you would think they're still going to spend. I mean, Microsoft just announced a massive deal with AMD yesterday as well. But the threat of that is something that the administration might look into more deeply. And, if they do, then we're going to have to see how the market ultimately thinks of that in regards to many of these semiconductor names. Bitcoin right there. Wow, look at that. 66, getting above 70 would be very nice to see. We have not seen 70. When's the last time we saw 70K? Last time we were at 70 was May. Okay, so it's been about 2 months. We got to 67 on June 15th. That's the closest we got. We are just at 66.4. Clarity Act updates in general. We talked about it a couple of days ago. The August 7th is now the new deadline as per the House and Chair Committee of Finance in regards to passing the Clarity Act. Hopefully by August 7th, which is only a couple weeks away, ends up being the official vote and we get it through the correct legislator that we need. But, the Clarity Act has been in process for the past year now and it hasn't officially become law. So I'm hoping by August 7th we get some clarity. If that happens, obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum could be big beneficiaries of that. ETH has been having a nice little move over the past couple of weeks, which has also helped BMNR right there, up another 2% in the pre-market. They also, BMNR bought back 5.5 million shares of stock yesterday, which I thought was really good. They've authorized $4 billion of buybacks. They officially bought back $85 million of stock. I think every week they should be buying another couple $100 million of stock because, this is the time where you would buy back your own stock and get more ETH than buying ETH itself because the stock is trading below NAV. So theoretically, it makes sense for them to finally be doing this. And hopefully they're doing this as some of the crypto sentiment is changing as well. Amit, I heard a report that Trump is thinking of tariffing all countries another 10%. Yes, so this would be a new round of tariffs. His initial reciprocal tariffs were rejected by the Supreme Court a few months ago. And so the current 10% global tariffs are expiring this week, which is why he's getting ready to impose a new round of them. And, obviously the street's going to have to deal with that, but also he might try to exacerbate some of the companies that get those tariffs, or countries, in this case, Canada, with new 50% tariffs. So that is what we got in regards to Trump and Iran. I don't think there's any other major Iran updates outside of new strikes that happened last night. Those strikes are not, stopping, which means, unfortunately, it looks like there's just going to be more and more intensity in regards to those strikes back and forth. The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney did put out a statement yesterday, and he said these include tariffs on the Canadian auto sector, recognizing that the U.S. has been transforming all of its trade relationships, including those covered under the CUSMA, has made Canada create a series of detailed and comprehensive proposals. Canada believes in the benefits of free and fair trade, as evidenced by our new government signing. In all circumstances, Canada will work relentlessly and take any measures necessary to build our strength at home. So Mark Carney is not really saying that we're going to fight back against these tariffs, but he's also kind of making the case that we are going to champion for free trade. So you don't really have a hostile response in terms of, okay, you're tariffing our hockey sticks 50%. We're going to, tariff your, I don't know, what comes from America that we export often. Something else 50%, right? What do we make that we export? What is our biggest export? I don't even know. But they're not tariffing us 50% as aggressively. They're not tariffing our freedom 50% or our guns or whatever. So the point is there's not a there's not a hostile back and forth between them, which in my opinion means that Carney is basically agreeing that this is not actually going to last, because again, 50% is a bit aggressive. So I would imagine hopefully it doesn't last. Yeah, our Harley Davidsons or our McDonald's. McDonald's stock right here, slightly down. All right, let's get into earnings. We do have McDonald's earnings coming up, and let's talk about a bunch of the different earnings we had today. So earnings continue to go well. 88% of companies so far in the S&P 500 that have reported. By the way, Wednesday, tomorrow, 30% of companies are reporting in the S&P. So tomorrow's going to be a very big day for S&P 500 companies. But 88% of them so far have beat, which is very important. 3M revenue up 2.4% year over year. They beat expectations, 6.5 billion versus 6.4. Adjusted EPS 240 versus 224. Again, that EPS number was the most important thing that was beat by, I think it was like 82% of companies last quarter. 3M is up about 6.74% in the pre-market. And EPS to me is a really important thing that these companies are beating on, because it means there's some level of efficiency or productivity. You could say maybe it's buybacks, but not every company is buying back their stock at a tremendous level, especially not some of these companies that are under 100 billion. So there might be that inclination. This is what Jamie Dimon was saying the other day as well, around AI actually making things more efficient. And if it continues to make things more efficient, then, you're getting a use case for AI, you're getting the justification of CapEx, but you're also seeing the economy, which are made up of companies like 3M, actually start to show they can beat against EPS expectations because their actual upside is increasing due to their bottom line is going up, their bottom line profits because of efficiency, productivity, and workflows designed to make the enterprise better and more productive, which ultimately is the promise of what AI can do. Then you had Schwab, EPS up 42% year over year, 162 versus 155. They beat by 5%. I mean, that's a hell of a gain for a company of this size, up 42% year over year. Revenue is up 21%, 7.07 billion versus 6.9. They beat by 2% on that as well. That is really good for Robinhood. I would imagine Schwab, which is up 2% right here, IBKR, Webull, all these companies had a really, really good Q2 because, if we had this much trading, then I don't think that trading is necessarily going to be bad for the brokerages. Schwab now in total has, let's see right here, they got 120 billion of new assets in Q2. Total assets, wow, 13 trillion for Mr. Schwab. That's up 22% year over year. Robinhood, for comparison, is at 350 billion. So there's a lot of growth for a company like Hood. Even IBKR, I think, is at like 500 billion. Webull, I think, is below 100 billion. So there's a lot of growth for those companies in the brokerage space to be able to get as they continue to get assets. But 13 trillion now for Schwab, and that is obviously a lot of money that is trusting Schwab, but also wants to invest with Schwab, which is very important as well. The VIX right here, 1784. We almost got a VIX 20 last week. I think we got over it for a little bit, but it just didn't stay there, which goes to show the volatility might come through, but a lot of that volatility was only in one sector. I mean, again, the S&P off 1 or 2% from all-time highs, whereas the semis are off more like 15%. So a lot of that volatility didn't affect financials, healthcare, communication sectors. They affected semis. I don't know what the exact update is now, but 20% of the S&P 500 was semiconductors back in June. I think that number is probably closer to like 18% now, just based on the downturn we've had. And I could easily see it getting back above 20% if the semis come back. But that's where most of the volatility ended up coming through. SpaceX right there, that's up about 2%. Pre-market BMNR is up 2%, and then Ethereum is up 1%. As well. We have a bunch of earnings after the bell, IBKR, Capital One, Chubb. So we have all of those companies that we are going to look at. In terms of the other earnings we had today, so we had Schwab, 3M. Oh, we had GM, which also GM's been doing a hell of a job in terms of beating earnings. The stock has massively outperformed over the past year. EPS, once again, they beat by 12%, 357 versus 318. Revenue, 48.2 billion versus 47. Revenue's up 2% year over year. EPS is up 41% year over year. GM, although it's down 6% year to date, it is up 42% over the past year. I think if anything, it's showing that, Americans want to buy regular cars more than electric vehicles, as we've seen them consistently beat their numbers for a while now. And obviously, you'd be buying Tesla, not just for the car sales. There's a lot bigger thesis to it. But in terms of car sales, General Motors is selling cars. And it also goes to show the consumer is still buying cars, which is a good thing. And as long as that part of the economy doesn't crack in any meaningful way, like if GM horribly missed their numbers and people just can't afford car payments anymore, or, can't afford to even think of buying a car, that starts to show some deeper cracks in the economy, which hopefully, we're not seeing in a more aggressive rate. Is it true that the Red Sea closed last night? I don't know if the Red Sea closed last night. I do know that the Houthis are making it tougher for the Saudis to cross a certain strait. From what I'm seeing right here, the Houthi rebels announced a maritime embargo targeting Saudi Arabia. We talked about that yesterday. This critical southern gateway connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. The move aims to block Saudi shipping in retaliation for restrictions placed on Yemen. So it's definitely making it harder to cross through the Red Sea with this maritime embargo, which also leads to why oil prices are spiking up. I mean, you had Kuwait and Bahrain that got attacked yesterday again from Iran. You have a Saudi vessel that was on fire. You have a Greek vessel that was on fire based on strikes from the IRGC near the Strait of Hormuz. And then you had new strikes, the 10th new round of strikes in a row from the United States at around 4 p.m. Eastern yesterday on the Iranians. So, all of that gets your oil prices to kick back up. Okay, let's talk about let's talk about TSMC. So there's a few headlines here today on TSM that I also think are pumping some of the semis after the massive earnings that these guys had that the street is potentially excited about. So, and then we have to talk about a report on NVIDIA that I don't think a lot of people are talking about as well. So as per the Nikkei, TSMC is planning to raise prices for both advanced and mature node foundry services by up to 10% in 2027, reflecting higher costs for materials, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and the construction of new overseas fabs. I think obviously they're trying to bake in a little bit more of a margin as well, because they deserve to, since TSMC has pretty much all the demand you could ask for. Base prices increases will range from 5 to 10% depending on the customer and product. For additional high-performance computing chips orders exceeding customers' original forecasts, TSMC plans to charge an additional premium of 10 to 15% on top of the base increase, as price negotiations began around June and concluded in July. Now, TSMC has all the leverage in the world to do this, and part of the reason they are doing this, I think, and this is kind of one of those theories by Gavin Baker, is that they want to prevent an oversupply. And one of the ways to prevent an oversupply is if you raise your prices and you can't supply as much, but you keep your margins, because obviously people are paying a higher price for the amount that you are supplying. Obviously, if TSMC had the capacity to give Jensen and Hock Tan all the chips that they wanted and Sundar, then, we would have theoretically not as many compute constraints, because we would be either oversupplied by chips or properly supplied, which is kind of how the dot-com bubble fell apart. But that's not happening. And that's not happening for logistical reasons, but also might not be happening for intentional reasons, as Gavin Baker has pointed out many times, because if it were to happen, it would kind of collapse a lot of the merits of, how the semiconductor stack is continuing to evolve as an entire industry. Having said that, there is also unprecedented levels of demand. Again, we talked about it yesterday. Kimi K3 came out and said we're pausing all subscriptions and on the consumer side, because not even on the enterprise side, because we cannot handle the demand. So even with a higher increase of supply, you would still see some constraints. But the point is the fact that TSMC is now increasing prices, which might lead to less supply. What does that lead to? More constraints. And yes, TSMC wants a bigger cut. And they deserve to have a bigger cut, because, if Micron can have 85% gross margins, then TSMC probably deserves to have higher gross margins. Their gross margins, for comparison, is 67%, as Micron's at almost 90%. So it's not crazy that TSMC is trying to get more, but that could also create a little bit more of inflation. So it's one of those things that we have to, kind of navigate in terms of how these things are coming through and how these companies are doing what they're doing with their prices. Some of them are more of a supplier of an asset that can easily be manufactured from other companies. Some of them have moats and can't really create or can't really be replicated from other companies. So they have different abilities to have pricing power, even if there's not a supply-demand imbalance. But all of it at the end of the day leads to some level of an impact on the consumer. I mean, I was reading a report yesterday that said, well, so this was from Bernstein this morning. They said memory could get into oversupply soon, or they were saying by 2028, because of consumer electronics not being the main priority for the memory companies, aka them having more of a priority for data center companies. And so if they're more willing to supply all of their assets to data center companies, NVIDIA, TSMC, all the neoclouds, et cetera, then the consumer electronics business will probably take a big hit, which is why we're seeing some of those stocks and the suppliers of those stocks take a hit. But the overall advance of supply is going to enter into the data center industry. Now, having said that, this is kind of the same piece of logic that Bloomberg had a couple of weeks ago with their argument for why by Q1 of 2028, you're going to see a little bit more of an oversupply. The problem is that is discounting in a higher rate the level of innovation that we could see in AI over the next 2 years, which could once again explode the demand for not only agentic inference, but all the other different physical attributions of AI, like humanoid robotics, that would need a lot more memory. So I think all these projections of where memory demand is going to go or where supply is going to go, you kind of just don't know, since everything changes so quickly. I mean, theoretically, 3 days ago, people thought we weren't compute constrained because of how quickly things change. And as they continue to change, ServiceNow, Palantir, all the software names, by the way, down in the pre-market as the semis continue to go up. You just can't have a accurate estimate of when that supply demand imbalance. I mean, I think people probably thought in 2023 we wouldn't be as constrained as we are in 2026 in regards to HBM, DRAM, and NAND, and we are more than people can even imagine. ASML also raised their prices last week as well. Yeah, so you are seeing, I think ASML, TSM, I think a lot of these guys are seeing the memory guys, and they're like, okay, we're creating a product where we have legit monopoly power over, and we have less margins than 3 of the biggest memory companies. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think at some level you're going to get those price increases, and it's kind of a natural part of it if the memory companies also continue to raise their prices. Domino's and AMC had earnings yesterday. AMC had the best earnings in about 106 years. That stock was up 26%. Domino's also had a relatively good earnings. Stock didn't move that much, but it's up 2% right there from yesterday. So yeah, software names are down as the semi names continue to go up. We'll see if that flips. Yesterday, it actually did flip, and some of the semis stayed green while some of the semis stayed red. But in the pre-market, every semiconductor name is green. NVIDIA's up, AMD is up, SMCI, Intel on. Intel was at $89 on Monday, 102. That's up 5.6% right there. Lam Research, that's up 5.5%. Micron, 917. Micron was actually almost 930 in the pre-market, so we'll see if that breaks out. And then NVIDIA is up 1% as Nebius is up 7%. Again, that Nebius NVIDIA headline that you guys are seeing, it is not new news in regards to NVIDIA having a 9.3% stake in Nebius. That was disclosed back in March, but it did make the headlines because it was disclosed under 13G yesterday. And so it's helping the stock because a lot of people see that headline and they get excited, but it is not necessarily something new. What I'm interested in is if NVIDIA actually exercises the warrants they have for Nebius, because there's 21 million warrants. NVIDIA has a lot of cash. I mean, what if NVIDIA in September, they can't sell until September, says, hey, we don't want to sell. We want to actually exercise these warrants. And I think the warrants exercise at like $70 or something. Nebius is obviously well above that, so they would immediately be up on their equity. And, if they were to do that, then they would have a legitimate 9.3% stake, not just through shares and warrants, but through just shares. They already have, I think, an 11% stake in CoreWeave, which would be very bullish for Nebius and obviously very bullish for the broader Neo clouds as well. Let's do the green or red poll today. Curious to see what people think. I kind of think maybe today's the day we get a little bit of a breakout, not in some substantial way, but we've had almost 2 weeks now of a pre-market pump, open pump, and then 10:30 dump, then 12:30 pump, and then 2:30 dump, which is exactly what happened yesterday. Would not surprise me if we see it again today. But it's also one of those things where it's like maybe the dip buyers are finally stepping in and you're getting a bit of that momentum to the upside. Also, on top of that, volume on the S&P has been horrendous. It's been like 50% of its typical volume. It is the month of July, and July tends to be a little bit more of a quiet month in terms of volume. So I think that could be creating some of the consolidation as well. Why wouldn't NVIDIA exercise those warrants? Well, you never know. They sold all their Applied Digital. I mean, that's a lot of money for them in profits that they could be, capturing. So, which could boost their EPS theoretically. So I don't know. It's up to Jensen. It seems like Nebius are really good partners for NVIDIA, and they would continue to hold it, but you just never know, right? So we're gonna have to see in September what NVIDIA decides to do. We should be getting 13Fs in a couple weeks. We got a couple of them yesterday. Nothing too big out of those 13Fs, but the Bill Ackmans and the Warren Buffetts and all those, we should be getting those pretty soon, and we'll kind of see what he's been doing. Bill Ackman still continues to believe Uber, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Meta are his biggest holdings, and he did a podcast recently where he talked about why those companies are the companies that he wants to continue betting on, why he believes in those companies, and honestly, he's just saying big tech are going to be the winners, and it's hard to kind of deny how important those companies are. Here's what he said yesterday on some of those big tech names.
At least we missed the opportunities when they had moments of cheapness. But I think the market has reacted very negatively to the very large capital expenditures that these companies have committed to. In the approaching many hundreds of billions of dollars, and I guess investors are concerned about, are they going to earn adequate returns on these investments? And I would say we don't share that concern at all. One, the kind of valuations of the companies have come down significantly, and that meanwhile their growth rates are accelerating, and that's what really creates an opportunity. And we have confidence in the management teams here when they say that we're earning, very, very attractive returns on these investments. It makes sense to us. I mean, it's not clear which frontier model is going to be the winner, or whether there will be a winner, right? There's always, OpenAI was kind of in the lead, and then
right.
We had
now Anthropic.
Google, and then
yeah.
Anthropic seems to be the kind of lead horse. But one thing's clear: all of these companies require massive amounts of compute, and the cloud is, the most scalable, safest place to get access to that kind of compute, and that explains certainly the Amazon story.
I want to.
And that's why its top holdings are Microsoft, Amazon, and now Meta. Meta potentially becoming a compute play for Ackman to ride the cloud wave with that company as well. Okay, let's talk about this NVIDIA headline that I don't see anyone talking about. And you have to really kind of dig deep for this story. Put in the chat if anyone knows what I'm talking about. I feel like 99% of you have not heard this story because it went kind of under the radar. But it's really interesting. And it came out from a popular sell-side firm yesterday. And still, people are not talking about it. Which makes me think NVIDIA might legitimately surprise a lot of people on earnings if they're going to be doing this in a really interesting way. It's not the Nebius news. Okay, so this thing went completely under the radar. All right, so let's get into it. So what is NVIDIA doing that a lot of people don't know about? They're buying a ton of dark fiber. This is from Wolf Research. A competitor recently pointed to a potential dark fiber network build-out being undertaken by NVIDIA. We picked up a number of inbound calls from investors questioning the veracity of that call. Based on our conversations with industry contacts, we can confirm this project is real. Our favorite play on this NVIDIA deployment is Ciena. There's a lot of implications for different stocks, including Palantir and Nebius, in regards to if NVIDIA is actually building out a network of dark fiber. Now, what does this mean? Based on our conversations, we understand that NVIDIA is buying up long-haul dark fiber all over the United States, with fiber counts ranging up to 100 pairs. Our industry contacts do not know why NVIDIA is buying up dark fiber. Our sense, this is from Wolf Research, is that NVIDIA is trying to resolve bottlenecks across their GPU ecosystem. The GPU suppliers' recent deals with Lumentum, Coherent, and Corning offer other recent examples. We presume this effort is oriented around NVIDIA's NeoCloud customers, which, unlike the hyperscalers, have been slower to lock up dark fiber network capacity themselves. We recognize there are other potential reasons why NVIDIA could be doing this. Competing in the GPU as a service market has been raised as a potential alternative explanation, for example. So, what does this mean? Theoretically, NVIDIA has realized that part of the reason that they've been able to become a $5 trillion company and part of the reason why AI has been so compute constrained is because there's just not enough capacity. Part of that capacity to be able to build a GPU ecosystem requires a dark fiber ecosystem. And being able to build that dark fiber system requires a ton of investment. And that investment also requires a ton of collaboration with different partners who are helping you build out that investment. I also think this story right here is why Jensen said Marvell is going to be a $1 trillion company. Because at the end of the day, you need to resolve these different bottlenecks that exist when it comes to optics. Now, what is the relationship between dark fiber and GPU? Dark fiber ecosystem refers to companies leasing or building unused dark fiber optic cables to create private high-speed networks. This is the internet revolution. For GPUs, these massive unlit networks act as the ultimate high-speed highway. Because AI training requires thousands of GPUs to work together seamlessly across different physical locations, dark fiber allows companies to link servers at the speed of light while bypassing standard congested internet traffic. If Wolf Research is right, and Nokia also plays a role in this as well, that is correct. Palantir, with this on-prem partnership they have with NVIDIA, plays a role in this as well. If NVIDIA is trying to get all this supply of dark fiber, the conclusion, the TLDR, is NVIDIA is trying to compete with the hyperscalers. And the reason NVIDIA is trying to compete with the hyperscalers, my theory on it, well, there's a couple theories on it. My first theory is that NVIDIA is trying to compete with the hyperscalers because the hyperscalers are trying to compete with NVIDIA. Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they're all coming up with their own chips. Amazon with Trainium, Google with TPUs. Now this frozen V2 thing, Microsoft's in the work with some chips. Meta's been talking about chips for a while. So they also have to buy from Google or from NVIDIA, but NVIDIA knows that hey, one day there might not be buying as much. So why don't I get into the cloud computing game? Why don't I get into the resolving bottlenecks of compute game, not just providing the GPUs, but by also providing the infrastructure to get those GPUs online? I think that's one of the reasons why Jensen is doing this around the hyperscalers. But the second reason that I think they're buying up all this dark fiber to create the connectivity that would make GPUs makes sense is because NVIDIA kind of has to resolve these bottlenecks. Like the compute constraint narrative is really important because it proves that there's more demand than supply, which gives the upside to all these different names that are part of the stack. But at some point, if there's no supply, like that demand theoretically can't get supplied, right? And it's, you can't have demand that is waiting for years to get supply. You need some level of infrastructure, and who else but the biggest company on the planet with the most amount of cash to be able to resolve some of those infrastructure concerns, which would be NVIDIA. So far, NVIDIA has basically said, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta, you guys, Nebius, CoreWeave, we'll give you some money, we'll buy some of your stock, we'll exercise some of your warrants, but you guys go figure out how to resolve this. We're just going to give you the GPUs. Now I think NVIDIA is recognizing, okay, these guys are moving too slow, or the demand is outpacing the amount of movement that they're doing, or we just want a cut of the pie. And I think the other reason they want a cut of the pie is because Jensen unveiled that new NeoCloud product. It was kind of like NeoCloud as a service, effectively, that their first partner was Sharon AI 2 weeks ago, where one GPU sale creates a revenue split with the NeoCloud and NVIDIA, so that as the NeoCloud rents out that GPU, Jensen gets a piece of a cut from the renting out of that GPU, which means the one-time sale of a GB300, which costs like $53,000, can now get monetized long after they make the one-time sale. And so again, we don't actually know if they're buying up dark fiber, but if you believe Wolf's research contacts of all the people they've been talking to in the industry, from suppliers to vendors to distributors, that is something that NVIDIA is doing, which to me is very bullish to NeoClouds, because it means they're trying to help the NeoClouds continue to build what they're doing by working with them to get these GPUs online. It's not really bearish to hyperscalers, because the hyperscaler is going to be fine, but it does mean that NVIDIA wants to compete a little bit with them, because they need to resolve these bottlenecks. It's very bullish Palantir for building on-prem data centers. It is bullish Ciena, Corning, and Cisco for the networking and fiber optics capacity that NVIDIA would be working with to actually get that dark fiber online. And then theoretically, it's bullish Marvell because of optics. It's also potentially bullish for the photonics names, although NVIDIA is not specifically working with any of those photonics names based on this report that we have. So yeah, I mean, we'll see if that plays out over the coming months. Maybe Jensen will talk about it on the earnings. NVIDIA, right, they're up 2%, but it goes to show that NVIDIA is thinking 5 years from now, how do we resolve these bottlenecks? And it might require them to buy a lot more of that dark fiber in order to get that compute to come online. You got NVIDIA right there, 207, that's up 2%. We have 1 minute until the market opens. BMNR is up 2%, S&P 500 up 0.53. Did most of you guys say green on the poll? Let's see. Either we get rejected today at the open, or we end up holding at least some of these gains. Most people saying green. All right. Let's see what we can do. We've got 30 seconds. Thank you all for being here. Someone says 30 seconds until the mute. I would challenge people who typically mute the bell to just leave it open. Just leave it open. Just let your ears hear the ringing of the bell as we open up the global capital equity markets, all of us here together. Why wouldn't you just leave the bell open? Why wouldn't you just leave the bell open? Refute the mute. There you go. Shout out to Nonfiction. Refute the mute, baby. Tuesday, July 21st, 9:30 a.m. The stock market is now open. All right, wake your ass up. Let's get into it. The S&P 500, 746.60 is what we get on the open for Mr. S&P. Robinhood getting a nice little move as soon as we get into the open, 103.56. The stock was below 100 yesterday. That's up 4.3%. 3M, that's up 7% on their earnings. SpaceX is up 2%. Tesla's up 1%. Meta, 650. Not bad. Thank you, Mr. Meta, getting a little bit of love. So let's see if we can hold on to that. It was at 637 yesterday, pumped up all the way to 648. GE Vernova, that's up 4.3%. GEV getting some love right there. Ondas, that's up 2%. They got a $6.9 million contract yesterday. Redwire's up 4%. Lunar's up 3%. Iridium is up 0.5%. MicroStrategy up 3.5%. IBM continues to head down. They've got earnings tomorrow along with ServiceNow and Tesla, but IBM right there, that is down about 0.5%. AMD, 5% up as we enter into the market open. Marvell's up 6%. Lumentum's up 7%. Air Test Systems is up 12% after that massive earnings that they had last week. Credo, that stock is also up right here. Microsoft, are we green? Microsoft ends up going red as some of the hyperscalers are going red while the semis are going up. You've got Credo, I think, up 4%. Credo up 5.4% as that continues to go green. NVIDIA up 2.5%. Robinhood up 5.5%. Where is Mr. Palantir? We are down. For those asking why, it is most likely because of the algos that have been set in place for semis going up and software going down. I mean, like, genuinely, I think that's the reason why these software names are getting hit. It is what it is. I bet you Salesforce is down. Salesforce is down 2.3%. Salesforce was up 4% yesterday. So I don't think anything changed between yesterday and today other than the semis going up. Adobe right there, that's down 3.4%. But if the softwares are down, that means the semis should be up very nicely. Micron, 7.23% as that continues to go green. And Nabesis, 195, holding on to that 7% pump, which is also continuing to go green. Intel up 7%. I mean, this is the classic playbook. This should not be surprising for those that have paid attention to markets all year. If the semis have a really nice big move up, Robinhood getting a 6.5% move. I mean, Robinhood sometimes trades with the semis because, if people are trading the semis, there's a lot more brokerage activity happening. And I think Robinhood theoretically reacts to that. So that's why Robinhood's probably up right now. 105.36 as that one continues to go green. McDonald's down about 1%. Bitcoin still above 66. SpaceX losing a decent chunk of the pump, 123 back to 120. But it was green. Rocket Lab, can we get back to 70? I think this week, if we could just hold above 70, that would be nice. 66.38. This one's been relatively stuck ever since it lost 75. ASTS, that's trying to get back over 60 as that's up 3%. CoreWeave was up 8 yesterday, gave back all of it. CoreWeave is back up 4, 75.90. Didn't go below 70 yesterday. It was very close. So kind of trending in that 75-80 range would not be the worst thing. Meta loses all of it, which was unfortunately inevitable as the semis go up. Amazon loses all of it. That's down 1%. Google down 0.5%. Microsoft is down as well. How about Apple, which was the sort of flight to safety over the past couple of weeks? Apple, 333 to 324, as that's down 0.5%. Mr. Micron is getting a pump. So what the important thing about Micron right here, the levels that I've seen, 955 needs to break above 955. It gets that break, even if it falls back into the 930s. That's a very healthy test of resistance right here. You just don't want to see this kind of crack below 900 again, which is kind of what happened towards the end of the day yesterday. But you're up $70 right there, up 7%, 930, back to being a $1 trillion company. A 955 move would be very, very nice today. And I think if we see that happen, you probably get Nebius back above 200 and Sandisk heading into the 1600. Sandisk right there, 1492, and that is also up 7% here on the day. Tesla got an ugly hit yesterday, 373. That's starting to try to get some resemblance back above 375. That's up 1.14% on the day. Your photonics plays, Lumentum, 807. This was at 680 yesterday. Coherent, that's up 6% as well. Again, Jensen did invest in Lumentum and Coherent. They're both in the S&P 500 as well. So, the general optics momentum has been seen positively in the semiconductor stack. It's just those names, were at 1100 and 700 not too long ago. So they have taken a pretty big beating. ASML right there, that is up 3%. Who reports next week? Pretty much everybody. So this week, again, we have Intel, ServiceNow, Tesla, Google, IBM as our big names over the next 2 days. After hours, it's Capital One and IBKR. Next week, it's Robinhood, Meta, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Reddit, MicroStrategy, Coinbase, Rivian, Tempest, Chipotle, SoFi, PayPal. We have the Fed meeting, MasterCard, First Solar. I mean, you have all the companies, Cheesecake Factory, Visa, Bloom Energy, Seagate. So next week is going to be the big week for seeing if these companies can continue to produce results. Iren right there, still holding 40. Once we broke over 40 yesterday, Iren did not look back. Took a couple hours into the day. I think at around 12 p.m. it broke through 40.67. That's up 1%. And then Netflix, which has some more convertible debt that they are offering, has been flat over the past couple of days. Amcor, which 95 to 60, taking a pretty big beating. That is up 4.6% as Micron hits 940. I mean, let's see, dude. Maybe 950 is in play today. Dude, when it moves, it's violent. Look at that. I said 940. It's at 944. Within seconds of me saying it hit 940. I mean, this one is a violent move. There's only 1 billion shares outstanding too, which is why it moves so quickly. Whereas, SpaceX has 13 billion, Nvidia has 24 billion. So it's definitely not a small float, but compared to the volume it gets, volume's already 5 million on Micron. It's definitely very volatile. Google right there, flat. Amazon is flat. Robinhood, I don't see any news on Hoodie today, but I'll take it. 106.19. The only news was yesterday they got an upgrade to 160 by Bernstein. I mean, the stock kind of fell on that upgrade yesterday, so I feel like today it's either that or it's trading with the semis. And as the semis go up, maybe Hood ends up going up as well. Ministry of Bahrain says the alarm siren has been activated. Citizens and residents are requested to remain calm, head to the nearest safe location, and follow updates through official channels. So it looks like Bahrain potentially dealing with more Iranian missiles. Kuwait also just said it is currently responding to Iranian drones and missiles. So Kuwait and Bahrain continue to face some of the struggles that they hit yesterday with Iran. Archer up another 2.7%. This Archer Anduril eVTOL, it's called Thunder. It's actually really cool. I'll play the video in a little bit, but it's the first eVTOL. Here's a few pictures of it for the battlefield, and it looks pretty sick. I mean, this thing looks pretty freaking cool. Autonomous eVTOLs for the battlefield. I can understand why the street's excited about it. Now, the question is this going to result in some serious revenue for Archer, which has, kind of been flat on the revenue, but they've had a big backlog. And I don't know if Anduril is buying it. I don't know if it's a joint partnership with Anduril and the DoD is going to be buying it from them, but it does feel like this product will have the propensity to be able to sell. And I think the street's just, giving Archer that premium because they know that revenue is theoretically going to come through. 1.6% up, 540. Stock was at 430. Yesterday as well. Palantir, do we flip green? We did not, but we are not at the lows of the day. 133.60. Ondas, we also have that $1.5 trillion defense budget that I think is going to be approved. We don't know if it's going to be approved, but if it is going to be approved, then yeah, you're probably going to see some of these defense names catch a little bit of a bid. Ondas right there, 705. That's up 2.5%. SanDisk, wow. All right, so memory making a comeback. Kioxia in Japan, which is their largest memory company, had a really good day yesterday. Kospi did okay. I'm sure a lot of people saw this Reuters article about this 24-year-old in South Korea that turned 13,000 into 200,000 based on a 500% margin loan and then got liquidated. Now owes the broker money. That story has been going pretty viral. Obviously, we've seen a lot more of that margin debt accelerate in South Korea and in the United States, quite frankly. But, if the Kospi theoretically recovers, even if it doesn't get back to 9,000, it was up 3% yesterday, you can at least hopefully stop some of those liquidations from happening at more of an aggressive rate. Kospi right there, up 3.5. That sounds brutal. Yeah, I played the video yesterday on the close. It's tough, right? Because, I did a little bit more research into it. And apparently in South Korea, by a certain age, you're expected to have a good paying job, a family, and a home. It's like culturally part of the zeitgeist. And if you don't, you're like seen as a failure, so there's this popular influencer in South Korea who's been telling people like the stock market is your last chance for freedom. And if not, you'll be left behind. And, he's been influencing a lot of people to take out loans to buy stocks. And it's worked so far until this 30% decline on Kospi. So it's part of the reason why the leverage and the liquidations have been so intense over the past couple of weeks. Lumentum right there, still up 5%. Seeing some red candles come in. But you are also seeing these names take a little bit of a hit right there. Reddit, 184.65. That's up 1.6%. Isn't this everywhere in the world? No, I don't think so. Because I was having a conversation with Arnie once. Arnie, you guys know him, good friend of the channel, and he'll be live with me in a couple of weeks to cover Palantir earnings. And he was saying, in Italy, you were seen as a failure if you try to build a company and you fail, right? If you try to build a startup or something and you fail, you're seen as a stupid person who shouldn't have even tried to do anything. The culture is not rewarding a failure. Whereas in America, you try to build a company and you fail, you're seen as someone who took a brave chance and had a lot of experience. And quite frankly, if you go to apply for a job and on your resume, you built a company, the company failed, but you learned a lot of experience in hiring and managing people for 2 years, and you managed the P&L, you're seen as an asset to that company because they like people with entrepreneurial experience because they're going to be leaders inside of an organization. So in America, I think the culture is different. I think in America, you can be 35 years old, no family, no kids, trying to build a startup, going after your dreams, and you are praised in this country. You're not seen as a failure, because this country rewards entrepreneurship. That's not the case everywhere else in the world. And I think that's a unique culture that's different. So now if you have the cultural icons of the country saying, hey, you got to have this amount of money by this age, and if not, you're a failure, and the only way to get it is by investing in Samsung and SK Hynix, it can put a lot of pressure on people. Whereas in America, I'm not saying that doesn't totally exist in America, but I do think there are different cultural ways that other countries interpret this stuff. SK Hynix, that's up 8.4% as that continues to go green. So I don't know. I think, if SK Hynix and Samsung continue to go up, South Korea is going to be fine. But if they don't, you still just have a lot of leverage that's stuck in the system. Oracle right there, 125, as that's up 3%. It depends why it failed, though. That is true, because FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, is not seen as a an icon who tried his hardest, right? Neither is Bernie Madoff. But in general, you're not vilified in America if you take a risk with your life and try to go after it, because everyone who's created anything big in America had to take that risk. That's why the American economy doesn't require 2 companies to be the basis of the S&P 500. Like, there's 500 companies. There's so much more innovation out there in America. And you're not shamed for taking a chance. Oracle's credit default swaps, by the way, are yielding 8%. So you can buy Oracle debt and get double what a 10-year would be giving you right now in the United States. Now, obviously, a 10-year U.S. Treasury bond is way safer than, oh my goodness, dude, why is it ticking up this badly? 4.63. If that heads to 4.7, that's not going to be pretty. Oracle's not as safe, but still, the fact that Oracle debt is giving you 8% on your money and the stock is already down so much, it makes you wonder. I think for a lot of credit investors, there a massive arbitrage that's happening in Oracle as it's up 3% right here. By the way, Mizuho said Oracle is one of the most attractive risk-reward profiles in our coverage. They have a price target of 320. William Blair said Palo Alto is our top pick for the quarter, even after Palo Alto went up 100%. So they're still saying it's one of the biggest beneficiaries of AI when it comes to cybersecurity. And then Raymond James upgraded Meta to 850 as they continue to believe that the Meta Anthropic compute deal supports the thesis for Meta diversifying its revenue streams. Oracle right there, 126. So you got a lot of upgrades this morning across some of these bigger names. Pretty much everything is green right here. The only names that are red are the hyperscalers and software, which is very typical when the semis go up. Robinhood breaking through 106 again as that continues to go green. Circle, we listened to the Circle CEO yesterday. I like that guy, dude. This is like the 3rd time I've heard him talk. I like the way he communicates, and I think he's very practical around crypto legislation. Like, it doesn't feel like he's trying to pump something or say something that's not real or overhype something. He seems like a very rational guy about explaining where the market is going, not only for crypto legislation, but more importantly, where the market is going for stable coins, which is kind of the thesis of Circle's business. And I've not done enough due diligence to go into them or take a position, but I think the CEO is very level-headed. And so that Clarity Act legislation probably has been part of the reason why Circle has made a massive move over the past couple of days. But obviously, it's got to get passed in August in order to make things make more sense right here. Broadcom, are we at least above 380? Okay, we are at least above 380. We were 390 at the open. We're now 382. Qualcomm is losing most of its momentum. All right, so some of these semis are losing it. Palantir is gaining green candles, which means you know what happens. If the software names get some green candles, the semis are probably getting some red candles. Coherent, a couple red candles. Amcor, a couple red candles. CoreWeave flat. ASTS back above 60. Intel, a few red candles, 104 to 102. Nebius actually holding on. Nebius 196. It was 199. Above 200 would be very, very nice to see. Tesla did expand their robotaxi to 2 new cities today. Let's pull up those cities. That was announced about an hour ago. Tampa and Orlando. Tampa and Orlando. You can now get... Do we have any people in Tampa and Orlando? I've been to Orlando 2 times in my life. I don't think I've ever been to Tampa. But robotaxi now expanding there. I think for Tesla earnings tomorrow, dude, there's just been zero good news on this stock for the past 7 months. I mean, there's been nothing substantial to get it to move. In fact, there was some beef yesterday on Tesla Twitter. There was a bunch of OG Tesla people basically getting upset at other OG Tesla people for asking, why should I continue holding the stock? And, some of these OGs were like, well, you have to be a long-term investor. And then the other guys were like, I'm tired of hearing this long-term investor shit. I'm like, I get it. Like, that's, when you're sitting on something that's not moving, it is tough to tell people just focus on the long term. But I wonder what happens this earnings, because energy was down last quarter. Deliveries and production numbers are not that impressive. I mean, FSD revenues are not scaling like crazy. They have a ton in cash, but they're not really using it for buyback. So I wonder why Optimus is nowhere to be found in any meaningful capacity. I just wonder what Elon's going to say. What is Elon going to say to get this stock to get a pump? Granted, stock fell from 420 to 370 over the past month. So, any positive catalyst that is somewhat bullish, I think could easily pop this back up to 390. But you're starting to see the frustration with a lot of Tesla. And it's not just Tesla. There's a lot of stocks like that. But Tesla in particular has not really benefited from a lot of this AI boom over the past few months. And I think that's why people are a little upset. It's the same way I feel with SoFi. I mean, look, I get it. I mean, at the end of the day, the stock's not moving. A lot of times you ask yourself the question, how much more of the long term do I have to focus on? Now, sometimes right when you capitulate is when the breakout happens. No one can always know. But that's a very individual personal decision that everyone has to make. Sandus right there, 10%. That one showing no signs of weakness. And this one continues to make a move. Deliveries are up 20%. The problem with deliveries being up 20%, though, it's not affecting the bottom line. It's not affecting earnings, and it's not affecting revenue. Like, Tesla's not compounded earnings and revenue for the past, 10 quarters? It's been negative, or it's been like break even. And so I think that's the issue. Like, they have a growth stock multiple. Like, they have a multiple that is magnitudes above a typical growth stock multiple, and they're not growing in a substantial. I mean, the fact that energy declined last quarter was really surprising. I could not believe in the energy constrained environment that we are in, Tesla was down year over year on energy. Reddit right there, up 3%. And so I think there's a bunch of easy things Elon can say on the call, or by showing some numbers around energy or Optimus production starting, that can get the stock to move. But so far, Micron has taken a lot of the attention from a Tesla, because Micron's earnings are incredible and the forward PE is significantly cheaper than many other tech stocks, including Tesla out there. Google continuing to fall right there, down 1% as that's getting hit. AHR is also continuing to do well. Admit you're getting paid to trash talk Tesla. I don't know if saying that earnings and revenue hasn't compounded in 10 quarters is necessarily trash talking them. That is the truth based on looking at the numbers. But see, I think this is why a lot of the Tesla community is fighting with each other. Because some of these Tesla bulls are like, hey, we were promised growth, we're not getting growth. And the other Tesla guys are like, hey, just like wait, the growth is coming. And you have a bunch of people saying, wait a second, like you keep telling me the growth is coming, but the growth's not there. And to be honest, the people that are being patient are probably going to be right on the long term. But it's tough to be patient. It is tough sometimes to be patient. Where is Zeta? Are we green? Zeta 2144. That's up a little bit. AMD actually is getting more of the pump than it got yesterday from that Microsoft partnership. I did some more research into that Microsoft partnership. It's really bullish. Like, Microsoft is basically choosing to seriously invest in AMD's rack infrastructure and start to offer that as a massive component of agentic inference, because I think they're also seeing the demand for CPUs is not only rising, but they need to be able to keep up with that demand based on the proliferation of agents. And so theoretically, I think AMD, Intel, I think they're going to have really good earnings. I don't know if the stocks have priced it in. One could argue that the stocks absolutely have because they made such a big move. But that Microsoft partnership was actually very bullish from what we saw yesterday. Nebius 197, maybe 200 is what we could see here today. SpaceX getting a little bit of green. There you go. Actually 5%, 125. So some of the buyers stepping in. Rocket Lab not really reciprocating with that same green, but back above 67 from 66. I don't think we get a ton of macro data today. We had CPI and PPI last week. I think we actually get ISM, right? Today is Tuesday. No ISM. We did get the ADP employment report early in the morning. It seems like the market didn't care. U.S. private employers added an average of 16,000 jobs per week. ADP weekly hiring gauge shows fourth straight week of slowing down of jobs. The 4-week average declined to 19,000. Hiring average 21,000 for the week ending June 20th. Weekly hiring average 30,000 in early June. Hiring peaked at 40,000 jobs for the week of May 2nd. Figures are based on ADP's seasonally adjusted payroll data. You know, the labor market has not really become a big issue. In fact, that day in June where the labor market was so good that the market tanked because there were fears of inflation means that hiring slowing down is actually kind of bullish because it means inflation is not as aggressive. So at least the one thing we haven't had to worry about for the majority of this year has been the labor market. Now, I could say that theoretically, whereas practically, a lot of people will say, hey, you know, I know a lot of people that are losing jobs and it's not pretty out there. And that's fair. And that's valid. It's just in the data, which is, you know, where the market concerns itself with, you're not seeing that aggressively. Although Intel did announce more layoffs yesterday. They didn't give a number of the layoffs, but it's kind of incredible, dude, because Intel has gotten so many government subsidies. I mean, they literally got their stock revived by Trump, you know, taking a big stake in it, and still they're laying off people, which is, you know, they might have to do it as a company, but it obviously doesn't look the best if they're doing it and they're getting all this government funding. Nebius really trying for 200 here. How about CoreWeave? 77.14, that's up 5.8%. Lemonade, that stock is up 1%. Circle up a nice 8%. Bitcoin continuing to move. AEHR getting that rebound from last week after a pump 50%, now up 20% today, as this one has taken a hit. No, a lot of people have been talking about Path because there's a person who lost like $10 million in this name. I don't know the full story. My understanding is they took a margin loan and they got liquidated. If someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Look, 10 million is a lot of money. I think if you're at that level, you kind of don't go all in on one stock on margin. You can very comfortably live off a 4 or 5% yield on 10 million, which you can get risk-free. You don't even have to take any risks. You don't have to do it with the whole 10 million. You can do that with part of it, you know, but it's part of the bull market, right? This is what happens. Like greed, it gets the best of us. There's a lot of leverage that enters the system. There's been actually a lot of posts on Wall Street Bets that have been going viral of people just losing their gains because of how ugly the past month has been. And, you know, obviously that's leading to a lot more pain. But that's also something that kind of has to get wiped out of the system for us to make a next leg higher. Otherwise, you get really weird stuff happening, and that weird stuff, you know, you need something to move forward to wipe out some of that leverage. Because if not, then things just get too euphoric, right? Adobe right there, that's down 2%. There was actually a video or a photo of someone on X that posted their account. They had 27 million at the top in June. And as of last week, they had 6 million. And someone asked underneath their post, hey, like, would you rather sell right now? And they started with 1 million, by the way, in January. So they went from 1 to 27 down to 6 right now. They said, hey, would you rather keep the 6 and sell everything? Or would you be more upset if you sold everything and kept the 6 million right now, and then the 6 turned back to 30? Let's say if we like pump like crazy by December, and you know, you would have had 30 million versus 6. Or would you be more upset if you sell right now, get the 6, and then it goes to 1 by the end of December? So we end up getting another 20% decline. And he said, I would be more upset if I sell right now, get the 6, and it ends up going to 30. which goes to show, right, that like 6 million is not enough. You need more. How did the mic get hit? Okay, hold on. Okay, is it better? We're going to reconfigure the mic. It's fixed. It's good. Yes, yes, yes. We're good. We're good. We're good. Worse. Too loud. Okay, hold on. 1 second. Let's do this. Okay, give it a second. Okay. All right, how about now? Should be better now. ASTS up 7%. Should be better now. Wow, ASTS actually making a nice move. Yes, good, good, good. All I did was, literally all I did was replug it in and out. That's so weird why that happened today. Anyway, the story was, the guy asked him, would you rather be happy if your 27 million turned into 1 million and you cashed out now and took 6 million, or would you be mad if you cashed out, took the 6 million and the stock and your stocks went back up to 30 million? And he said he would be more upset if he cashed out right now and his stocks ended up recovering to go back to 30 million versus saving himself if the stocks ended up going down to 1 million. So the point is, you know, people are really playing for generational money because they obviously believe in this AI build out. They believe in this story and they believe in taking out leverage in order to maximize that story. He was not Korean. He lives in America, but maybe he's Korean. It was an anonymous account, so who knows? Maybe it's Korean. But the point is, the dude was like, "No, I want to see the 6 million go back to 30 million. I'm not going to like, and if it goes to 1 million, I'll be back where I started at in January. But I'd rather hold on to see it go back to 30." And I think part of that is somewhat rational because you're just like, dude, there's no fundamental reason for why any of these stocks are getting hit, and so these stocks should come back. As Nvidia gets a red candle right there. But the other part of it's not rational because it's like, that's a lot of money. And like, how much is enough before you say, all right, maybe I should take some profits, right? 3M, 9% on the day. As that continues to get some more green, that 10-year keeps rising, which is not good to see. 4.63 now. 3M with their earnings. Again, big EPS beat for them. Same thing with Schwab. As that's getting it. How did he 30X? From my understanding, it was options on Intel, Micron, SanDisk, and a few other companies. Now, granted, if my 1 turned into 30, I'd probably sell. I would probably sell before I got to 30. I would have sold at like, if my 1 turned into 3, I'm you know, like, I wouldn't have been. But then again, you know, if you take the risk, you deserve the reward. But not selling at 27 or not selling on, if that 27 turns into like 21, I feel like I would have been out. Be like, see ya. Now the 27 turned into 6, and the problem is their options, right? So there's decay on the time, and so you know these names have to pop back up, or else the decay just eats at the value of it. CoreWeave also up 5%, just below 77, but a lot of the neo clouds coming back today. Cypher and Iren also making a nice move as Cypher is up 8%. What about Palantir and Hood though? Yeah, but first of all, Hood had a lot of options on it, which I definitely sold because they had expired. But if I have options on something, I feel like that's always in the back of your head. It's like, dude, at some point you have to sell. Whereas if you have stock, you can actually sit back and let the stock do its thing. But then again, part of the leverage that exacerbates the gains is because of options. Which, you know, to be fair, this market has been really friendly to people buying calls on semiconductor names. I mean, people have made so much money doing that. I mean, there were people who bought Micron calls. There was like a hedge fund that bought 50 million of Micron calls that turned it into 2 billion because they got the bottom in March. And so, like, obviously there's a lot of money that's been made, but at some point when everyone's buying calls, then the leverage might just be too aggressive. Wow, the 30-year is at 5.1%. Goodness gracious. All right, so the 30-year treasury right now at 5.13 as the 10-year at 5.7 or 4.7. Benny, thank you for being there. Hoodie holding on to that 105 level, 105.63. It was at 98 yesterday. Is this one made a rebound? Yeah, I mean, the amount of people that probably leveraged up on Dell which is back to 400. This thing was at 380 yesterday. This is also what I mean about like fundamentals versus the semis moving like a pack. I mean, what changed between yesterday and today between Dell being worth 380 and 400? Not much. So it's one of those things where if it's a green day, the semis are going up. If it's a red day, the semis are going down. And the problem is we have not had a string of green days. We've only had a string of red days. Same thing with Bloom. Bloom was at like what, 192 yesterday? It's at 219. There's nothing that is, in fact, you had some bad news on Bloom in regards to delays on one of their data centers with Oracle in New Mexico. But it doesn't matter because if the semis are up, the algos are taking all the semis up and Bloom is part of that. I bet you T1 Energy is probably up on the day. T1 Energy, okay, this one somehow ended up going down. This one should be up because this is moved with all the semi-energy names. I don't know why this one's down, but the majority of the GE Vernova, a lot of these names, Credo, they kind of all move with each other. Nebius, did we hit 200? Yes, we touched it for a second. Let's see if we can get back above it. But Nebius and Micron obviously moving with each other as well. It's one of those things where if we get a red day tomorrow, Blue, Micron, Nebius, all of them will get hit. But today seems somewhat green, at least for now. Hopefully we can last. Micron is taking a little bit of a hit, 945 to 927. So you're seeing some of those red candles come through. And we got to see if we can close green. Did you discuss how Fable is staying upgraded for all users? Yes. I actually using Fable yesterday. It's pretty good. I used it for the first set of tasks that I ever tried to do it on, and it's pretty damn good. But yeah, the problem is people are interpreting that as bearish because Anthropic obviously has to compete with the cheaper models that are coming out, and they need to give access to everyone because if they don't, people are just going to switch. Now, again, Anthropic's rumored to end up the year at something like 50, 60 billion ARR, growing like 10x year over year. I don't know if they can keep that up for next year, but it's enough of an argument to justify a $1 trillion valuation. It's just the problem is going into the future. Well, it's probably gonna be 2 trillion because their valuation right now is 1 trillion. Problem is going into the future, if investors really discount the ability for them to grow that ARR or even monetize the margins of tokens, you know, that's a risk that you have to put into your model when valuing Anthropic. And I just don't know if the street's ready to absorb that much liquidity for a new IPO this year. Archer, that's still up about 2.4%. We tried Robinhood Social. I will be on Robinhood Social in a month. They are bringing on, from what I was told, they are bringing on a lot more people in a month. And so I talked to them. I will likely be on the platform in a month. And yeah, I've not interacted with it too much. They're building out certain creator tools and stuff to make the experience really good. But most likely in like a month, I will be on that platform. Did you see Tanner and Chris debate yesterday? Don't Tanner and Chris debate like every week at this point? I saw them debate when I was in Singapore. It was like 3 a.m. my time, and they were live debating, and it was great. It was A-class entertainment. Rock Lab right there, 67.55. But look, I think Chris's points are valid about being a bit cautious. I think Tanner's optimism and practicality around where AI is going is also very valid. And I think both have been right over the past month. You know, Tanner has been dead on about the AI thesis and the compute stack not going away anytime soon and only getting more and more aggressive. And Chris has also been right to say, hey, a little bit of a hedge right here and some caution, given most of these stocks are down 40% in the past month, is not a bad thing. Now, I will say Leopold seems like he hedged his bets like so well from a timing perspective, because he disclosed, I think it was like, what, a couple $1 billion of notional puts on his last 13F. I mean, this is the time to sell those puts and take those profits, right? Like, unless we're going down even further. But if he actually hedged the entire downturn on his portfolio and gets to sell the bottom, which would be the top for those puts, and then rebuy back in on these names after they've gone down 30, 40%, I mean, he's going to have an incredible year that probably avoided a lot of pain. It's something that, you know, a lot of fund managers don't know how to effectively do, which is time their hedge. Because you can have a hedge all year, well, that means your gains get offset by the hedge. But if you have a timely hedge and you get in and out of the hedge, within a few weeks or within a month of the worst of the decline, I mean, you get to really benefit from the upside and the downside of those moves. Micron now seeing a bit of a higher velocity red candle at 924. So I am very curious to see his 13F because it seems like the guy knew we were getting euphoric, hedged his whole portfolio, and now if the euphoria has died out and the momentum comes back, there might be an opportunity to buy more. Robinhood above 107. Above 107 as we continue to go green. Situational awareness also led FluidStack's latest private round at $8.5 billion, which, what is FluidStack? It's another neocloud. So if private investors are going crazy to put their money into neoclouds, it's kind of funny that the public market reaction to neoclouds is so bad. Like, I could understand private market investors not caring about putting their money into private software companies because software is taking a hit. So the public software decline kind of matches the private sentiment. But private sentiment around neoclouds is massive. And the fact that, they raised $700 million as an $8.5 billion company, and they don't even have the type of capacity that like an Iren or a Nebius has, is pretty impressive. Which goes to show that the neoclouds might have some more momentum as cloud computing businesses. SPY right there, that's up 0.45 as that continues to go green. Where is oil? Are we still up? Wow, 84.50. That has not slowed down the whole day. It is not slowed down the whole day. We should have known it was the top when CNBC guys finally turned bullish and bought Micron at 12.50. Shout out to Farmer Jim. And it was funny. I remember watching that segment. I was just like, dude, you didn't buy it the whole way up. You're going to buy it at 12.50. And then he's not buying the dip. It's like, it's been dipping for, 3 weeks now. And every time he's on, he's like, well, I'm waiting till it gets, it's like, dude, you bought it at 12.50. You have to like it at 900. If you don't like it at 900, the fuck did you buy it at 12.50 for? Like, it just, but I think eventually Micron will probably be back to those levels. But, in fairness to his logic was it's a value stock when you look at the forward PE and the earnings growth, which he's right about. There is a lot of value in that. It's just, the stock is already 7x in a year. And so the question is the value known to many people? Micron 920 as that takes a hit from 945. What do you think about ServiceNow? Their earnings tomorrow are going to be super important. Last time they had earnings, they dropped to 80. It was like down 15, 20% from around this range. If that happens again, then something that McDermott is doing in terms of getting people to recognize the value of ServiceNow's workflows in conjunction with broader AI adoption is not matching the street's interpretation of them as a software company. Having said that, ServiceNow was the precursor for all of SaaS last quarter. Last quarter, ServiceNow fell 15%. Then Palantir fell 20%. Adobe fell 15%. Adobe actually, I think, was like 24%. Salesforce was down. So I am hoping ServiceNow does well, A, because I think it's undervalued. B, I think a lot of retail has picked this name as one of the software companies that should be able to get a re-rating at least up to 120. This thing was at 140 a month ago. And then C, because we kind of need ServiceNow to set the stage for the software companies to get respected by the street. Because at this point, I am kind of convinced that, if ServiceNow goes down, then all the other software names, no matter how good of an earnings they have, they're going to go down. Like Figma is not going to be able to get, you just need the software names to not be seen as companies that get destroyed by Anthropic, which, that narrative is still overhanging them. You can still discount some of their future cash flows on fears that AI is going to be a headwind, but not to the extent that the market has done so far. And so, tomorrow's going to be really important for ServiceNow to not mess up. It dropped because of their cringe reporting. McDermott definitely was a little weird on the call. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's about the call anymore. It's about the street's reaction to their numbers. Now, they missed on margins last time because of some acquisitions, which I don't think they're going to do this time, but I don't know. At this point, you would imagine the street respects 20% growth compounding at their scale, but tomorrow we're going to find out. AMD 523, as that's up 3.8% still on the day, but it is down from 530. Palantir 134.20 as well. Big money is already positioned in SaaS. Now's the time to be patient. I agree with that. And once again, it goes back to that conversation around patience. If you've been holding SaaS names all year, and then let's say Q2 semis end up rallying aggressively and SaaS ends up selling off again, that would not be fun. But big money, just like in SaaS, also the hyperscalers have been positioning themselves. I mean, Adobe and ServiceNow were 2 of the top 10 stocks, along with Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon last quarter that were bought by most institutional investors. So the market is still believing there's an opportunity here. By the way, speaking of some of the institutional picks, Oppenheimer came out with the report yesterday, and they said within tech, we would recommend buying Apple, selling FICO. Within communication services, we recommend buying Google, selling Disney. Within consumer discretionary, buy Amazon, sell Home Depot. Within energy, buy Target Resources, sell EQT. Within materials, buy Corteva, sell International Paper. Within industrials, buy Grainger, sell Uber. Within consumer staples, buy Archer Daniels, sell Pepsi. Within healthcare, buy Neurocrine Biosciences. The biotech names are getting a lot more love. Sell Danaher. Within financials, buy JP Morgan. Within REITs, buy Well. And within utilities, buy Entergy. So those are their top buys or sells. Some of them are interesting, like within tech, buy Apple. I get the Apple thesis, but there are some really undervalued names compared to Apple. This is as per Oppenheimer. And then selling Uber, I thought was kind of weird. I mean, Uber just had one of their biggest acquisitions ever with Delivery Hero. You would imagine that's going to compound their cash flows even more aggressively than it has been. These guys do almost $15 billion in free cash flow. But that was their sell on Uber. Let's get an update on the consumer and kind of what's going on there. And then we'll keep moving on.
Them because the states are so leery of making a mistake, the complexity of means testing, not to mention the 10 million people who are going to lose health benefits as a result of the big, beautiful bill.
No, I mean, important stories, of course, just not necessarily snapshots of full consumer spending across the economy. But that's not to say that there aren't pockets of weakness. Look, if you're a home builder, you see it with the higher rates and the affordability issues on housing. D.R. Horton CEO says affordability constraints and cautious consumer sentiment continue to impact new home demand. We know that housing's been sort of separate and weaker because of that. 3M CFO, we continue to see a couple places with pressure, including consumer electronics, auto, and auto aftermarket, and U.S. consumer spending. So I think it reflects also where you sit in the ecosystem. But I thought the Ally Financial and Synchrony, importantly, because look, if there was a problem, a broader problem with the U.S. consumer, you'd see that there in the delinquencies and some of the credit issues. And we haven't heard that from the big banks, and we're not hearing it yet. So that's good.
Let's talk more about the broader market action as stocks get a bit of a lift here this morning. Joining us at Post 9 is Venu Krishna, head of U.S.
So you're seeing those consumer discretionary names that have come out over the past couple of days and had earnings, Delta being one of them, saying, people continue to fly nicely, along with some of the stuff from the consumer discretionary brands, GM today as well, in auto sales, showing that the consumer is not really struggling, which might not match the reality of some of the stuff happening with the consumer, but is definitely definitely in the numbers, not showing something that's super bad. Rocket Lab right there above 68. Nebius getting that 10% day, breaking out above 200. Very nice to see. Hopefully we can hold on to that. Meta 646, that just flipped green. Oracle having a relief rally after a while. Broadcom would be nice to see this thing get back to 385. That one and Micron. Micron actually is going down while Nebius is going up, which is kind of weird, as both of them usually follow each other. Shopify probably down because the semis are up today. But Shopify was pushing 130 yesterday. Wow, Iran, nice little 4% move. So Iran and Nebius both going in the same direction. Mr. BTC is very close to 67. Hoodie getting a nice candle right there. Blue skies, it looks like. Doesn't look like a lot of resistance there for Mr. Hood. What happened to the PayPal deal? It was rejected by PayPal for good reason too. I mean, dude, 60 billion is not enough for that company. I don't care how bad PayPal has been doing. It doesn't feel like management should, let those names get hit. Or let those valuations be that low. But yeah, they rejected it. And, they're probably going to wait for another offer now. Yeah. Oh, that's the other reason Hood's up. Yeah, you're right. Bitcoin. I mean, that's a pretty simple reason why Hood's probably making a little bit of a move today. I mean, if we get a Bitcoin breakout, like a real 80, 85,000 type of breakout, ETH is obviously going to be closing in on 3,000 if that happens. And that in and of itself could be a really nice catalyst for Hood going into earnings, which are in 8 days now. Okay, Bloom Energy, that's up 10. Dell losing 400. Some of these semi names losing their steam. Nebius is one of the names that's actually holding on. SpaceX 127 doing its thing. Keel, that's up 6. New Era Energy, I know people talked about this over the past couple of days. That is up 8% as well. Mr. Sandisk is up 7. It was up 10. Pakistan's prime minister says, we are concerned about the recent escalation in the region. All parties must exercise restraint. We will continue our role as a mediator. Okay. It's not really doing much, but they will continue to mediate. I don't even know if there's anything to mediate, because nothing is meaningfully changing right now with what's going on. Is Myth from Pakistan? I'm not from Pakistan. I don't even know that much about the beef between Pakistan and India, to be honest. Like, if you ask me why do they hate each other, I don't really know. It's probably because of religion, but I've never studied it deep enough to explain it to you. But I do not hate Pakistan, although I know there's beef with those two countries. NVIDIA right there, 205. As that continues to break down from the 208 level, but still up. Here is what our boy Tarek said from Kalshi. We know these markets for compute is starting to get bigger in the financial derivative space. Here is the argument he made for where he thinks the commodity of compute ends up going long term.
I mean, I think that it really is anyone who is basically a natural long or natural short on compute. So anyone who naturally benefits from compute prices going up, and anyone who naturally benefits from compute prices going down. So a producer versus a consumer, which is usually how, a producer of commodity versus consumer of the commodity. And for both of these cases, what we're starting to see is, for the first time in the last year, compute is not in this sort of a continuously decreasing trend. It has actually perked back up, and then we're starting to see this sort of natural volatility and cyclicality to compute, which is like there's going to be times where demand is going to outpace supply and vice versa. And that's kind of a healthy dynamic to build a derivative market on top. And so anyone who's a natural long will over time want to take a short position and vice versa to manage the risk, right? So if you have essentially a certain amount of budgeting for how much compute you're going to basically, how much you're going to spend on compute in the next year, which is now becoming an increasingly bigger part of, the line items and, public and private companies' financials, it becomes natural for you to basically want to smooth out some of that exposure by hedging it on the forward curve and over time on the futures curve, which we can sort of overlay on top of the forward.
Do you have an idea of the TAM like for this market? Like how big? Because obviously you're going to build liquidity over time. But when I think of like the natural longs, I'm like, yeah, so hyperscalers with $1 trillion of capex are going to be taking out a short position on the order of $100 billion or something. Like how do you think about sizing the market over time? Obviously, it's not going to materialize instantaneously, but it could be very big.
It's interesting. So I was, I wrote about this last week, but the rule of thumb is every time you have an underlying market where people are transacting the spot, which is buying and selling the thing.
Yeah.
When you overlay a derivative market on top of it, historically, if that market has any degree of success, it ends up being at least 10 to 15 times the underlying market.
Okay.
right?
That's insane if that happens here.
I mean, this is the opportunity, right? I mean, it looks like we're oscillating around $1 trillion to spend by now on compute, right? And by 2030, that number is going to 10x.
Yeah.
And so you're talking. I mean, yes, it is an incredibly large
10
market.
trillion in derivatives potentially, just stabilizing the market and hedging various things and insuring different projects and whatnot.
Because the way that these markets evolve is obviously you get the exact insurance use case, the hedging.
Yeah.
But that tends to be usually like 5% of the entirety of the liquidity in the market. The rest is speculation and people arbitraging and doing a lot of other things. And so those markets tend to be very, very large.
Yeah.
And I think the compute as a commodity is going to probably be the largest commodity on the planet. And so the derivative market for it will probably be the largest derivative market on the planet, outpacing treasury futures and a bunch of other things.
Shopify, whether you're just starting your entrepreneurial journey or you're...
So the interesting thing about that argument right there is his claim, Tarek, is that compute is becoming such a large industry and the derivatives around the essentially commodity that is becoming a compute is growing so massively that there needs to be a form of hedging. There needs to be a way to protect your downside. This is what we saw CoreWeave do with memory prices over the past couple of days. This is what we saw Larry Fink at BlackRock talk about as well in regards to a financial derivatives market. And there's also people that obviously want to take out leverage on certain moments. Like if Google announces a massive compute deal, if you could bet on the derivative futures contracts on Google's compute trajectory, it could give you way better returns than call options on Google stock in and of itself, right? Especially if there's an arbitrage between Google stock for a variety of reasons, because stocks have so many variables, versus the commodity of compute that Google could be selling that's tied back to Alphabet's success. So I think that compute futures market is going to be big. It's going to be important. It's going to require a lot of different players getting involved to make that a liquid market. But what it also seems to signal is that, I mean, there's going to be more CapEx, right? Like, because you can't have the hyperscaler spending $1 trillion or spending like $100 billion and not into the trillions of dollars, which is what Jensen has been predicting for the past few years now, and not have a massive financial market form for derivatives underneath it. And if those companies stop spending that much money, then there is no point for the compute futures market. But if Larry Fink and Kalshi and all these companies are seeing that spend continue, doesn't have to, it's not guaranteed, but if they're creating financial derivatives market, obviously they're incentivized to make money off those financial derivatives because they're going to be making the market. But they also probably see the compute spend not slowing down as Bloom hits a full 10% on the day. Wow, speaking of valuations for these compute names, China's Moonshot, the creator of Kimi K3, just increased its valuation potentially to $50 billion for its pre-IPO fund. It was at $31 billion on Friday. So they added $20 billion of value apparently, based on the demand for Kimi K3. That's what it seems like. Huh. Yeah, you look, if Anthropic's worth $1 trillion, you would imagine Moonshot should be worth more than $30 billion. But with the virality of a product like Kimi K3, it probably makes sense. Also, they're going to need more money to, pay for more compute. Which goes back to that same argument around compute constraints, but they're going to have to raise a ton of money in order to actually keep up with demand. Who's investing in Jersey Mike's? We talked about it yesterday. I don't see the super bull case on it. I've not gone through the S1 yet. I think they're pricing at like $20 a share, $8 billion market cap. I don't know, man. Now that things have sold off so much, I think there's a lot of different areas to put money in versus sandwiches. But maybe it outperforms some of the names that have taken the biggest hit. Here's Charles Schwab. Here's what he had to say about their Q2 activity in regards to AUM and trading.
Returns of 70%. And part of what's driving the leverage, and we see it particularly in our pledged asset lines, is that clients want to be able to spend some of the money, some of the wealth that they've accumulated, but they don't want to incur the taxes. And so they're leveraging their assets, they're meeting their needs, they're sending kids to college.
Not to buy more stock,
houses,
but to essentially take equity out of their portfolio.
They're doing well. They're certainly buying more stock, and you see that in the margin growth. But we also saw our pledged asset line originations grow 60%. That's a function of people having large gains that they don't want to liquidate. They love the stocks that they own, and they're not selling them.
I mean, expenses only grew 11%, revenue growth of 21%. So good operating leverage. Is that reflective of the embrace of AI?
AI is certainly part of the story. AI is helping us reach out to new segments of clients, helping us bring insights to clients that we wouldn't otherwise reach on a day-to-day basis, and it's absolutely driving productivity. We've seen our engineers, those that are building our experiences, our capabilities, they can get 15 to 20% done more now than they could be before AI. And so that's great. What's so exciting about that is forever, technology has been the bottleneck to us getting more things done. And now other groups are coming to me and saying, hey, technology is moving so fast, I need to add people to keep up with them. So we're in a great spot where AI is absolutely fueling an acceleration of productivity. Yeah, we're growing our business meaningfully. I mean, our client business is growing. We're adding lots of clients, lots of new assets. We grew our net new assets year over year by 50%. So our clients are coming to us with more assets, wanting to do more, asking to bring not only just their investing, but they want help with their wealth needs, with their tax needs. They want help with lending.
But can't they get that increasingly from like AI agents?
You know, it's interesting. I do focus groups every quarter. And this quarter, one of the individuals told me that a longtime Schwab client was experimenting with an AI wealth service. And they asked him when they should take their required minimum distribution. And it told them an age that was 2 years past when they should have started. That would have cost that individual a lot of money if he didn't call up Schwab and ask us for a second opinion. And so I think AI is absolutely an important part of serving clients. But to me, it's the combination of people and AI that's going to win. And that's where we're perfectly set up.
You don't want to spend your time correcting all of AI's mistakes.
Well, hey, we want to play our role in making sure people make the right decisions in their financial life. And if we've got to clean things up. But I think overall, AI has been great for our clients. It's part of what's made them more engaged in markets, and it's also fueling some of the record trading activity that we see. People absolutely have used AI to create algorithms to trade on their behalf. So that's fueling some of the interest in markets, and so AI is a net benefit for sure.
Are you one of those that have blown through your AI spending budget and are having to reassess mid-year?
I've heard those horror stories.
Yes.
Thankfully, no, we've operated in a very controlled manner. We're using it thoughtfully. And I think over time, we'll find ways to be more efficient with the AI in terms of what models we're directing questions to. I think the AI will become more efficient as well. So, no, our costs are being managed as it relates to that, and we're not letting it surprise us.
I mean, I used to have you on and your predecessor on, and the first question would be about interest rates and the interest rate sensitivity, right? And the cash sorting. Are you less dependent on that, given some of these growth initiatives you're doing with wealth?
I think our business is an all-weather business model, and part of our growth and wealth absolutely diversifies our revenue. But it all comes from, we just want to help clients. And they're asking us for more and more help with their wealth because they have more wealth than they've ever had. And so that is fueling the growth of our wealth business. We saw flows into our proprietary wealth solutions grow 85% in the first half of the year. So that's pretty significant growth in a big business.
Yeah, I mean, you've gotten into alternatives, we've talked about, into crypto, into lending. Where do you see the most opportunity right now?
Well, I think it's just in serving the holistic needs of our clients. I think there's two factors that are driving people to Schwab. Number one, investing is becoming more at the heart of their financial lives. There's a lot more interest in investing. More people are investing than ever before. And then second, there is a bull market for convenience in our country. The way that shows up in our industry is they want to do more with one firm. And so with investing at the center of the financial ecosystem, and then wanting to do more at one place and us able to offer that, we have lots more clients coming to us to help them meet their everyday financial needs.
I mean, honestly, if he's talking about AI actually being productive for Schwab internally, he's talking about more interest in investing. That should be very good for Hood, which is part of the reason I think Hood's rallying today. Bitcoin's doing well, but Schwab earnings are really good. And it should indicate, that Hood earnings are probably going to be very strong, but that the overall market is facing a lot more of a tailwind versus a headwind in regards to the appetite for investing. I mean, this survey was just released as well. This for the week ending July 15th. This is the AAII survey as Nebius gets a nice move up to 204. 45% of participants right here are bullish over the next 6 months. And the week before that, it was 36%. So in one of the worst weeks we had in the stock market, more people turned bullish, which essentially means people bought the dip. And they continue to, want to buy the dip. But maybe it's also because the dip finally created some really attractive prices. I mean, You know, Nebius 300 to 160 essentially, up 12% today. CoreWeave 130 to 72. You know, at some point, I think people said they wanted to nibble. IREN was almost below 30 last week. And maybe some of that nibbling has happened. Now, today's move is a bit different from the past couple of days. Today's move, we're into 1030. We're not seeing the pump necessarily get faded aggressively. Even Micron, 945 to 918, right back to 930. So it's starting to make a comeback here. You're actually seeing a different character from previous days, which is nice to see. The question is just, can we hold on to that towards the end of the day? Rock Lab right there, 68.70. As that continues to go green. SPY almost 750. Wow. Yeah, SPY's actually having a really good day. Volume is still lacking on SPY, but still. Ondas having a nice day as well. Is oil still up? 84.28. I think Kramer might have called the bottom. Didn't he get like yeah, there was either Friday or yesterday where he got really bearish on something. Yeah, I think it was Friday. Yeah, it was Friday. All right, well, that definitely helps. There you go. 746.90 on the S&P. But we got to see if we hold this, dude. That's the thing. Every day we've experienced this, and we haven't necessarily held it. He was bearish ASTS. That is also true. ASTS having a nice day. Right, I think Intel also, he got upset about. Wow, ASTS above 60, which is nice. Intel back above 100. What do you think about Salesforce long term? I think Salesforce is undervalued, but unlike some of their peers in the software space, the growth is not as expansive. I know their agent force growth is really good. The problem is that's not contributing to revenue growth. Everyone's like, well, agent force is growing 350%. It's like, okay, but revenue is growing 10%. So the number of messages sent in agent force is not interesting to me if it's not affecting their earnings or their revenue. And quite frankly, most of their earnings has been because of the buybacks, that they took out debt to be able to buy, which is not the worst thing if they think they're super undervalued, but the buybacks are not doing anything. So I don't know, man. There's just way more growth in a company like Palantir, even if the multiple is expensive. There's way more growth in a company like ServiceNow. Having said that, getting bearish on one or two software names or one or two semi names means nothing when they're moving like a pack. Salesforce was at $200 when Palantir was at 160 and ServiceNow was 140. Zeta was at 25. They all went up in June. They all came down in July. I think same thing with the semis. If Micron gets back to 1200, you're probably going to see Nebius breaking out back into that 280, 270 range. I mean, they all just move with each other at this point, and you kind of got to pick which one which bucket you're comfortable being with. As Nebius really gets a nice move right here, up 13.5%. Yeah, Corning should be up today as well, as this one got hit over the past couple of days. That's up 5% here. And that's green. Have you tried to use agents in Hood yet? No, I've not. Honestly, I've just been lazy in setting it up. I actually need to connect it to my account, but I have not tried giving an agent a prompt to be able to trade for me yet. Oscar, where's this at? Healthcare has been doing well. Oscar up 3%, still up 30. This one's had a hell of a year, as healthcare AI has done very well. Or AI has helped a lot of these healthcare names. ESPN is getting hit with a variety of layoffs after combining their NFL network operations, as per Disney. Okay, so you got some ESPN layoffs. Update on the Clarity Act. The details of the agreement remain elusive. Senator Loomis came to an agreement on crypto ethics language on covering Trump, according to 3 sources familiar. Senate Majority Leader Thune says Republicans are still working on whether the crypto market structure can get the Democrat votes. He thinks there's a good chance of a deal that he can get the votes as of today. Wow. But notes it's been up and down, and he's been back and forth between optimism and pessimism about odds, as per Punchbowl. That would help Mr. BTC. If we can actually get a move there. G Money says he just shorted Nebius at 206. Okay, let's see. Let's see if this is the top 4 today or if this one keeps moving. NVIDIA 205, Redwire, that's up 7. MicroStrategy, that is up 5. By the way, did you guys see this report that Novo is suing Lilly over allegedly misleading GLP-1 ads? Novo claims Lilly compares the highest dose of Zepbound and Mounjaro against lower doses of Wegovy and Ozempic while omitting newer approved dosing options. So it looks like they're going back and forth. This was the response from Lilly here.
Novo Nordisk out with a new lawsuit against Eli Lilly, saying that they have unfair comparisons in their most recent advertising, that they're comparing not the same drug, they're comparing a lower dose Wegovy that should be compared to the higher dose. We've heard back from Lilly. They say this, quote, the gold standard for comparing medicines is a robustly designed, well-conducted head-to-head clinical trial. Rather than compete on the merits of its product, Novo is asking a court to stop Lilly from communicating the results of that trial. We stand firmly behind our advertising. This is something we had asked Novo Nordisk about, the fact that this is a head-to-head trial, and that's what the FDA recommends that companies do.
And they also say that their ad is truthful, transparent, and grounded in the most direct scientific evidence. And we asked earlier the general counsel, and he was like, I want them to pull out all their ads.
Yes, yes.
It's interesting that they're having that back and forth, but it just goes to show how big the GLP-1 market is and how massive these companies are fighting for it. Eli Lilly right there, $1 trillion company. Lilly's had a good year. Novo has not. Obviously, they've been dealing with a bunch of lawsuits as well. Hims, are we still at 35? We are just below 35 on Hims, as that has been taking a big hit. OSS did get a deal today. I think it's a $2 million contract. I think that stock's up 2.2 million for autonomous construction and mining equipment. They expect the customer program to generate 10 to 50 million in cumulative orders over the next 5 years. OSS is up about 9% today. This stock fell from 22 to like 11 over the past week. But it's now made a bit of recovery with the high beta names along with the deal they got this morning. RC says, I'm a pharmacist and Novo loss. Reditrude is way better than Novo stuff. I've heard a lot more about Reditrude, which I might be saying it wrong. I've just seen more people talk about it. The broader industry for many of these drugs just feels like it's growing a lot more. Also, that story about like lettuce being infected, apparently that was a false call by the FDA. Taco Bell was potentially involved in that as well, but I believe the FDA came out and basically said it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be. Wow, Coinbase finally getting a nice move. Look at that, 12%. It has been a while since Mr. Coinbase actually made a decent move right here. As that one continues to go green. Why is AEHR up? Well, they had a good earnings last week, and I think this is a pure sentiment check right here. If sentiment is good on the semis, these are these are the types of names that should really get a bid after. Wait, this thing was almost at one. What was the high on this? This was at 126. Yeah, so it fell all the way down to the low 80s. Back up to 60 is a nice move, but obviously it's taken a big beating to even get some of that recovery. Intel back up to 103. Wow, DigitalOcean getting some love as well. They had a really good earnings last week. They got a little bit of a bump, but they got taken down with the rest of the semis, and now they are coming back. Akamai, should that be green? That is also green on the day. Wow, a lot of you guys are asking about Jimmy John's. Are people seriously wanting to invest in this? Is the S1 even out? I can look into them. I just personally am not super excited about them going public. No, I don't even think their S1 is out. Wait, is it? Yes. Okay, it is. It is. So here's some of the highlights I'm seeing right now. They have 3,300 locations. Oh, sorry, Jersey Mike's. Someone said Jimmy John's in the chat, dude. Who said Jimmy John's? One of you guys said that and tripped me up. Jersey Mike's. Dude, who said Jimmy John's? Messed me up. Is that an actual restaurant? Jimmy John's? Oh, it is a restaurant. I've never heard of Jimmy John's. I've never heard of Jimmy John's, but I guess it's a thing. Anyway, Jersey Mike's, 4.3 billion in sales, 50% same-store sales growth, 166 million of donations that they've given, 12 million active loyalty customers, and 1.4 million average revenue per location with 3,300 locations. I don't think I've ever had Jimmy John's. No, I don't think I've ever had. I need to see margins, operating profit. I don't see any of this in this, what I'm looking at. Jersey Mike's has a 36 net promoter score, which is actually really good. Subway's at 23, Jimmy John's at 23, Chipotle at 22, and Firehouse Subs is at 27. I don't think I've ever had Firehouse Subs either. I mean, it's just like, is it worth what it's worth in a market that is so rooted in wanting growth and, you know, momentum via AI? I feel like that's the bigger question here. Seems like a lot of you guys have had Jimmy John's. Have you heard about Jimmy John's? No, I've never even heard of it. There's this one in Chicago that I know is super. Yeah, Potbelly. I've had Potbelly. That's like a big one in Chicago, right? There's not that many of those in Jersey. Their sandwiches were actually amazing. Potbelly. But I've never had Jimmy John's. ASTS 9.5%. As that continues going green. Potbelly sucks. I've had it once in my life, but it was really good the one time I had it. They have a lot of DC locations. Yeah, Chicago is the main place I got it at. Okay, Jamie Dimon. Let's take a look at this right here in regards to a few things he mentions about the S&P 500 and kind of where he thinks this AI leap is going.
Do you think, as you step back and look at the market as a whole, we're pricing in the perfect outcome at the moment?
I said probably not perfect, but probably a good outcome. Profits are way up. You know, you can grow into that even if it's high, but you know, if you have a downturn, then obviously it's a different story.
So sort of give us a gist in the same way you did for long dated bonds, like S&P 500 here. You would buy that?
When I do things, when it comes to equities, it's name by name. I'm not an index kind of person.
Have you bought any equities recently?
No, I have not. I mean, you said in general, my big buy at this price.
I know.
No, but if you came to me and said, you know, that this is a great investment, I would consider doing it. So,
with the SpaceX IPO itself, obviously it's now just, I think today is about round. It's back to its IPO price. How directly involved? You don't do individual IPOs, but you were quite involved with this one. You had Elon on just beforehand. How much did you think about that price?
Quite a bit, but you have to understand about the price. It's not what you want or don't want. You have hundreds, thousands of very smart people, you know, saying what they would do and how they would do it and how they value it. And you know, you need a clearing price. And so that's much more sets the price, you know, and this is unique because they said there's a price, which is kind of a different way to do it. But then people say, am I willing to buy at that price? And you can see all the debates and all the arguments. You know, it is an extraordinary company. That I do know for sure. I went to visit it, and Starlink is an extraordinary product and company, part of SpaceX. You know, I've seen numbers on the data centers in space that can actually work. You know, so some people know this actually works. There are some technical issues about, you know, getting data back here, which they would do by laser. You know, and then the technical issue is like, what the weather's bad, and you just move the laser to another part of the planet by moving to another satellite. But if it works, it's about very cheap energy, very cheap cooling, very stable. You don't get the vibrations in space you get here, and it solves this. Where do you put the data center issue? So look, these are unbelievable things. So Starlink has 10,000 satellites up there. The next version, V3, is going to have 100,000. And if you've used Starlink V2 version 2, it's extraordinary.
I think that's Diamond trying to say, I don't know if the valuation makes sense, but the company itself is incredible, which he's right about. The company itself is incredible. SpaceX actually having a nice little rebound here, 7%. But, he doesn't really comment on the valuation because, he can't justify it. Now, granted, JP Morgan made a lot of fees. So did Goldman Sachs off propping up the IPO. But unfortunately, the valuation was just a bit aggressive. ASTS has officially closed the 1.1 billion convertible notes that they filed for due 2034. Officially closed here as per today. So SpaceX, basically Starlink. I would say right now, again, the whole orbital data center thing is, part of the long-term vision. But, as of now, Starlink, I think, is the kind of core reason to be excited for SpaceX. Can you imagine if Wawa went public? Wawa should go public. I mean, Wawa, I think, do people live near Wawas? How many do they have in the U.S.? There are 1,220 Wawa locations in the U.S. Yeah, that would actually be an IPO that I also feel could do well. Granted, the margins are always the issue with these convenience locations. Wow, Rocket Lab also catching a bid right here. Let's see if 70 is possible. 68, that's up 3.5%. Do they have EV charging? Yes. There are a lot in New Jersey. A bunch of them near me have EVs. And a bunch of them have it for Teslas. But, the question is, do they have the level of momentum to actually go public? Yeah, there's not a lot in Texas. There's a lot more on the Northeast. Nabesis right here up 13. Mr. Hoodie still chilling out at 107. All right, so what do we think happens tomorrow? Tesla, IBM, ServiceNow, and Google. What do people think? If you have to sum up how those earnings, I think IBM's going to suck, but they've already taken this thing down 40%. I don't know if they're going to take it down more. I think Tesla's not going to be interesting, but I also think Tesla is cheap enough where any little piece of good news could pump this thing up. Google's the wild card, man. Google is because if they increase CapEx, do they go down because they're spending more money? And do the semis rocket? And if by somehow they end up pulling back on the CapEx, what happens to the broader trade? Which, again, I don't think anyone expects is going to happen. I don't think Berkshire would have invested if they thought Google was going to pull the rug in some meaningful way. I mean, Google's paying freaking SpaceX $1 billion a month right now to access compute. So I think that's out of the possibility. But if it does happen, it would be weird. I also think cloud might reaccelerate again. This would be like the 4th straight quarter of cloud. Also, search accelerated last quarter. I mean, imagine search, which went from 8% to 19%, might end up doing a big move again. Andy says, my second business did its first transaction yesterday. Might be able to afford food this week. Andy, what is your second business? I know your first one is going to be governed by Mr. Ryan Cohen pretty soon. Is it a second eBay store? Because that means you are getting big enough now to expand into different stores. Archer right there still up. AEHR up 23%. By the way, GameStop now owns 10% of eBay, which is kind of crazy. So they are really trying to get this acquisition to go through. Dude, when is the SpaceX launch on Thursday? Does someone know the time for Starship? Is it after the close? Or is it it's probably around that 5-6 p.m. range, right? So I think we might be able to watch it potentially. Jane Street is closed today, no rug pull. It's 10:50, guys. So far, we haven't seen them. They almost took Micron back to 910. Now it's right back at 9. Oh, by the way, so I was meeting a couple friends in New York on the weekend, and I met one of my friends that I haven't talked to in a while. He used to be a trader at Susquehanna Group, which is one of the largest market makers in the world. They're SIG for short. SIG, Citadel, Jane Street, all these guys do market making in the United States. And now he's leaving his job to go become a quant at a perpetual futures exchange. And when I asked him why, he was like, dude, perps are the future, which is kind of crazy because I've started to research more into perps, and I kind of believe they are the future as well. They're better than call options, and they give you more bang for your buck. But they're banned in the United States. So until the US unbans them, I don't know if we're going to see massive adoption. But what he told me is that as one of the traders at SIG, he was responsible for about 10 tickers. There's like 200 tickers that matter out of the 5,000 tickers that are listed publicly. And he managed like a $20 million P&L and focused on those 10 tickers. And one of the most interesting things he told me is that, and this kind of showed me the dichotomy between retail and institutional guys isn't that massive. He was like, dude, like I had to market make for Take-Two, which is the creator of Grand Theft Auto, for the past like year and a half. And he's like, I was on the same Reddit boards that retail investors are on, looking at when we had a whiteboard in the office for when the trailer was going to drop for Take-Two, for Grand Theft Auto 6, because, you know, we needed to market make around those super volatile events. And the way that he was describing it was like, I'm just as clueless as you. Like, people think we know information before. It's like, we don't know anything. We are like tracking the same stuff that everyone else is tracking. And we kind of have to track it diligently because, you know, when the Grand Theft Auto 6 trailer comes out, that's probably going to be a ton of demand for Take-Two stock at that moment. And they're going to have to try to provide liquidity. So it was so interesting because a lot of the things he was saying was just like, you know, the market makers sometimes are as clueless as retail, and we need to like actually hire people to go on social media and scan all the posts and see when things are coming out or not. And, you know, that's how we end up effectively market making. But he was telling me just so many different things about what it means to market make a stock, and, you know, where market makers get their spread, and, you know, if retail is buying a ton of call options, how market makers have to provide liquidity to that or hedge or be able to make sure the shares end up going through. Or like, you know, this one thing he told me was so interesting. He was like, if retail bought call options on a stock at $10 on Monday and it's at 15 by Friday, so they hit it out of the park, they know there's going to be a ton of selling pressure on that stock by around Friday, 2 p.m. because if it's super in the money, retail is going to sell those contracts. And when you're selling those contracts, that's effectively putting sell pressure on the stock, which means they can hedge or go short on the stock before that happens because they have access to the data of seeing how much institutional and retail selling there will be of a certain stock before it officially goes in the money if the call option expires at that strike. And so there's all these different little nuances of how the market makers end up making their little spread, but all they're looking for is a penny of a penny 1,000,000 times an hour. And that's how Jane Street, you know, did 40 billion of revenue last year, because they just repeat the same process. But it also requires pulling the rug sometimes in order to be able to make sure that those markets can continuously be liquid up or down. Apple right there flipping green on the day, 326, as that one continues to go up. Jane Street is banned in India because of this. Yeah, I mean, look, Jane Street has had some more unfair practices of going after retail flows. And theoretically, they're not supposed to. They're supposed to market make, right? Which means they're not supposed to front run or do any of this stuff. And like that stuff happens across every market maker. But Jane Street took it to a different level a few years ago, which is why, you know, India got really mad at them, and a lot of different countries were upset at some of the stuff. But that's also why they're so secretive. You know, no one knows who the Jane Street CEO is. You don't see him do interviews or podcasts. Like, they tend not to be in the public light. Tesla right there, 383, as that continues to go up. You do have a big Chinese IPO happening soon with CXMT. A lot of people have been framing this as the bear case for memory. The problem is, as Micron also almost recovers fully for the day, the problem is a lot of that Chinese memory is already going to be going to Chinese domestic chip manufacturers. So the idea that it floods the US markets, which was kind of the bear case, is A, Trump has to approve it, which is probably not happening. Rubio's definitely not on board with that. And then B, you know, there's still a ton of demand in China for those chips as well. Jersey Mike is the CEO of Jane Street. So I don't think the Chinese memory story is that bearish. Micron now not all-time highs, but intraday highs for Mr. Micron. That is green. BTC, are we still red? Or are we still below 67? We are, but very close. Amit is the Jane Street CEO. That'd be so funny if I did this show every morning, then right after I become a market maker. It'd be very funny. But it is fascinating, dude, just hearing him talk about like how they make a market liquid. Because if you want to buy a stock or buy an option, you need liquidity. And there's not always someone who's willing to sell you or buy you that stock like easily. So that's why the Citadels, the Jane Streets, they come in, because, and obviously they make a fee by being able to provide the liquidity, but they also make the market theoretically more efficient because you get filled. Now the problem is, you know, if you're getting filled from one of the market makers who's taking the opposite side of that bet, and you know, that's where you get the sort of spread that the market makers try to take. But if there's also a lot of demand for a certain stock or option, then, you know, it doesn't matter that much because that keeps it more liquid. SanDisk up 10.7%. As this one also is very close to hitting its highs for the day. Okay, market doesn't seem to care too much about the tariffs, which is good. Doesn't seem like market's reacting to that. Oil prices are still at 84.50. Still, we're getting a nice semi-rally, even with oil spiking up. S&P still up on the day. So has memory bottomed? I don't know, but honestly, if memory's bottomed, then semis in general have bottomed. Like, I don't think Micron gets back to 1200 without all the semis following it. So I feel like memory is your indicator, but who knows if it's the bottom, right? It's been a day and a half. We got to really see. What was the low on Micron? Well, the market was actually open. I think it was 807 or something. It was 804, which was yesterday. No, July 17th. Okay, 804. I mean, if we go back to 804 again, that would be a pretty ugly drop. So we got to see if that was our bottom. Update on the stock draft. Let's pull it up. Okay, Matt Money is Mr. Number 1 with the well-timed SpaceX short. Tanner's 2, Steve is 3, Chris is 4, I am 5, and then Jason is 6. Mr. Matt Money, SpaceX, VG. VG has also been crushing it ever since oil spiked up. Nubank's up, Duolingo's up a little bit, Amazon's flat, and then NextEra Energy, that's up as well. So the cool thing is in September when we rebalance, you know, that SpaceX short profits can be taken and you can lock in that gain. And then same thing with VG if, you know, you think oil is ready to spike. I mean, VG was pushing below $10 3 weeks ago. Now it's at 14. Obviously, oil has spiked, which has helped it. But if you have it in the portfolio, it kind of functions as a little bit of a hedge towards semis going down. Wow, Ondas 12 today. Okay. Nice little move here. This thing was at 650 the other day. NVIDIA says major customers are already testing Vera Rubin. NVIDIA says Vera processors are faster than AMD's Turin processor. NVIDIA says chips are on schedule for use in data centers. Okay, NVIDIA is finally coming out and saying some stuff. It's been a minute since we've heard from Mr. NVIDIA. Why do they have to call out AMD, though? I think it's because AMD has an event on Thursday. Is that why they're calling out AMD? NVIDIA says chips are on schedule for use in AI data centers, and the Vera processor is faster than AMD's Turin. Major customers are already testing Vera Rubin gear. That is verified. Well, it's from Bloomberg. Bloomberg, either Jensen's talking, obviously this is not a press release, but either a representative is talking or Jensen is talking somewhere to give these quotes. NVIDIA is somewhat getting a move right here. AMD, not really affected by that. So that event is on Thursday. I mean, AMD's already had some pretty big announcements this week. I wonder what they could say that could really get the market to be a bit more excited about them. Obviously, the stock is back from 460, so it's made a nice move here still since last week. Okay, yeah, everyone's reporting this. This is definitely accurate. The question is, did NVIDIA put out a press release on this, which I don't see. NVIDIA says major customers are already testing its next-gen Vera Rubin AI systems, and it outperforms AMD's Turin. This Broadco turns red right here. Yeah, that Anthropic deal, I mean, Meta got one, right? So maybe AMD gets one. Well, we all know NVIDIA is going to freaking crush the quarter. It's just a question of, will the market finally react to that positively? Or are we going to have to deal with them just being a big company and waiting it out? Here's the update from Trade Representative Greer on these new Trump tariffs.
338 of the Tariff Act of 1930 to impose additional 50% tariffs on certain goods from Canada, ranging from wine to hockey sticks to cement. These new tariffs will take effect 30 days after the signing. Now, Section 338 has been on the books for decades, but it hasn't been used to enact tariffs before. So we can expect that this will be challenged in court as part of this ongoing broader debate about the scope of the president's tariff authority. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer was on CNBC this morning. He said the administration is simply responding to Canadian action.
We've been asking for a year for the Canadians to remove these, to modify them, to adjust them. They haven't done that. And so we have a tailored action that covers a subset of Canadian goods. We aren't banning the goods like the Canadians have banned American alcohol. We're not putting a cap on them or limiting them like they've done to cars and dairy. But we have a tariff, which is, again, is a natural consequence of the Canadian retaliation.
Now, Greer also said that the U.S. expects to impose a new round of tariffs soon on as many as 60 countries based on the use of forced labor in products there. But he wouldn't say how soon that's coming, said he didn't want to get ahead of congressional notification and the like. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, meanwhile, issuing a statement yesterday responding to the U.S. tariffs, saying the trade war has raised costs for families, particularly here in the United States. And he said Canada stands ready to engage intensively to resolve any issues. Doug Ford, meanwhile, the Premier of Ontario, responded on social media last night with a more confrontational statement saying, "I'll never stop fighting to protect Ontario. If these tariffs proceed, Canada should respond tariff for tariff, dollar for dollar." Guys, it seems like the trade war is back on. Back over to you.
I mean, U.S. definitely has the leverage. It's been hurting Canada's economy more than the U.S. It's something we talked about with Tiff Macklin, the central bank chief of Canada, a few weeks ago in Sintra. So how can Canada make good on this to get rid of the tariffs?
Sure. I mean, any number of American products that are exported into Canada could be subjected to tariffs. You see the different political responses, though, between Ontario and the national government. The idea is, do we fight this or do we try to soft pedal it and talk to the Trump administration and see if we can come up with some resolution. If you're Canada, it's a really tricky problem because just the scale of the American economy is so much bigger.
Yeah, Chrystia Freeland, former foreign minister, great piece in the FT, sort of explaining how they're thinking about this in Canada, Eamon. And she argues in the case of against the U.S., vis-a-vis the U.S., retaliation works. And the booze boycott, she says, has been powered mostly by consumer choice. And to your point, some of these provincially owned liquor companies in Ontario and Quebec not to buy U.S. booze in this case.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we just co-hosted a World Cup that was a huge success with Canada and Mexico. So, you know, a peace in our lifetime is possible. We'll see whether we get there or not.
Eamon, thanks. Eamon.
So we just got an update after that. Carney says he spoke to Trump this morning, Tuesday morning. He says he and Trump agreed to intensify negotiations in the coming weeks. And Carney says we will look at all options if the United States goes ahead with the latest tariff threats. If he says he and Trump actually agreed to intensify negotiations, that means these 50% tariffs, I think, are likely not going to last. That's kind of a signal for, hey, we're going to figure this out. Which is kind of what I think the market's reacting to, is they probably don't believe it's that aggressive. Micron, 950. Okay, so completely going the opposite of the past week and a half now. This is usually when Micron takes a hit. You are starting to see it actually meaningfully break out here. I mean, if we actually go red today, we would have to have a 10% intraday decline from these levels, which I kind of just find hard to believe that could happen. Usually kind of tops out around 5-6%, and then we drop off. So even if we close at like 930, it still would be a really good day. And that 955 level, though, is very important. Broadcom also getting a little bit of a move here as well. If this NVIDIA news is accurate, very interesting. They called out AMD right here. It has to be them front-running this AMD event on Thursday and trying to take away a little bit of the shine here. Which, again, they wouldn't do that unless they were a little threatened. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they're about to grow 93%. Why do you have to call out AMD unless, you know, they're feeling that customers should pick their processing equipment for CPUs? Vera's still going to do $20 billion of CPU sales over AMD. Are we in fear and greed? Where are we at? I don't think we can be in fear anymore. No, we are still fear. 40 on fear and greed. We were neutral last week. Rocket Lab getting a healthy move right here, or at least trying to get a nice move right there. Let's see if that actually can make it out to the 69 range. Yeah, let's pull up the heat map. Let's see what's going on there. So pretty green outside of a few financials, consumer defensives, and Mag 7s. SoFi flipping green, Intel still green. SoFi is up 2. It was below 17 yesterday. All your semis, as you can see, are pretty much green. I mean, what semi is red today? I don't think. No, there's no semi that's red. What's a semiconductor name that's red today? I don't see any of them. And if they are, it's barely. Even ARM is up almost at 290 here. Microsoft is down because they are the ones making sure the semis can continue to be green. Although Microsoft's barely down today, 398. At least we're not back in the 370s like 2 weeks ago. Can we last is the question. That will be the question today. Cerebras, this one is up 9. As that continues to also be green as well. Wow, CoreWeave also too. All right, if you bought any of the semi dip, NeoCloud dip, memory dip, optics dip past week, you, at least today, are getting a little rewarded here. Maybe, honestly, maybe the market thinks Google's just going to increase capex. That could also be part of the reason. And they're front running what Google's going to say tomorrow. As for Bloomberg, Amazon e-commerce portal for business near $60 billion in sales. Wow. Freaking Amazon down today, but just unbelievably strong company. After hours earnings today are IBKR. We'll have Technical Tuesday as always. Capital One and Chubb Limited. So we got insurance, a bank, and a brokerage that we've got today. Dave says I'm selling some covered calls on Micron. The premiums here have got to be amazing, so I don't hate that. $9.49. You're also doing it after the 10% pump, which is not too crazy. Yeah, so the fact that SpaceX is getting a move is also kind of encouraging in terms of just pure high beta momentum. It's testing 130. The unlock schedule, I was taking a deeper look at it yesterday, is still pretty freaking ugly. I mean, you've got a significant amount of shares. So 95% is still locked up. And August 11th, you get the first unlock. August 21st, you get the second. Then September 21st. So basically 2 times every month for the next 4 months. And then June 2027, Elon gets all of his shares, or at least the majority of them, unlocked. There will be new supply coming in right here. Are the hyperscalers credit default swaps taking down the Mag 7 today? I do not think so. I think the hyperscalers are down simply because the semis are up. As annoying as it is, it does make sense, right? If the hyperscalers are losing money because they're paying the money to the Marvells and Microns of the world, then those stocks go down, the other stocks go up. The problem is over the past couple of weeks, the hyperscalers didn't really move that much, even though the semis went down. So like people thought, Meta will get to 700, Google will get back to 400, Amazon get back to 280. And that didn't really happen. But they didn't have as aggressive as a fall with the semis. Now, again, the sort of bigger concern here is, if by 2028 Meta says, okay, we don't need to spend $200 billion a year anymore, and they start pushing that down, does the market front run that for the semis well before the actual earnings start to peak out? And that is something I don't think we fully know yet. But now Meta's, building a cloud computing business. They're going to have to spend a ton on CapEx, which makes you think that that is likely far away to happen. Do you think they can all go up together? I think they can, but I'm reminded of one of the sell side reports I read, and I showed you guys after Micron earnings, where one of the analysts, he upgraded Micron to like 2,200. He was like, what's the point of buying a hyperscaler that can't buy back their stock, that is going to have negative free cash flow, over a supplier that has pricing power and that has all the free cash flow and is going to buy back their stock? And so it's one of those things where, the sell side is also rooted in this idea that you got to pick one or the other. And, right now they've obviously picked the semis more than the hyperscalers, but that means the hyperscalers, which are much more sustainable, in my opinion, than the semis, long-term, right, are attractively priced. It's just the outperformance, once again, all year has been the semis, but also the downside of that volatility has also been the semis because this is such a leverage trade. Robinhood 107.50, also high of days. Let's see if 108 is here potentially today to break through. Won't the extra shares not only crash SpaceX down harder if everyone sells? Yeah. The question is, they're not going to sell. I mean, that some of these people are like, oh, the employees will just borrow against their stock. They're not going to sell. I'm like, okay, some of them might, but I don't think all of them. Klarna's getting a move right here. Did that just happen for Klarna? That just happened, right? Yeah, 4 minutes ago. Klarna-Apple partnership. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Klarna Apple. Is it the first time Apple's partnered with a buy now, pay later company? Apple to launch upgrade device leasing program on July 28th with Klarna. The Klarna partnership We'll cover iPhones, iPads, Macs, and Apple Watches, giving customers another way to upgrade with Apple looking to accelerate hardware sales. Okay, so Apple is launching effectively a buy now, pay later program for their suite of products in partnership with Klarna. They're calling it US device leasing. Okay, I don't think this is that big of a deal. It's good for Klarna, but Apple already had a lot of different financing options on their, like I've financed so many products from Apple before. I guess they're giving more attractive. Dude, but Apple already lets you finance something for 12 months at 0% APR. Haven't people done that before? I've done that so many times. So like, I mean, good for Klarna, but I'm just like on the top of my head, I'm just like it's got to be a different use case for a different demographic that cares about this. But there you go, Klarna getting some love. Trump is live. I don't know who he's live with, but let's go to this.
Going to President last month. So did you raise it you will raise it with President Trump today?
Well, the Abraham Accords have been, I think, a tremendous success. I think you're going to see a lot of countries joining pretty soon. As you know, we have our original group, and it's so successful for them. Economically successful. It's been that. Nobody left, even during this time of conflict. So, no, I think Lebanon has a very important place.
What is your level of concern of a blockade of the Red Sea by the Houthi rebels, opening up another front in the war?
We'll see what happens. So far, it hasn't happened, might happen. But we take care of things. If something like that happens, we take care of it. You know, we've done that with the Houthis before, and we haven't heard from them in a while since we did what we did originally. That was about 45 days of very powerful action we took against the Houthis. And we've had no problem with the Houthis. They've had no problem with us for a long period of time, including during this conflict. I think that if there is something like that, we'll just have to take care of business.
The Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament rejected the agreement between Lebanon and Israel and said it's a sedition, is going to cause civil war. He's the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament, and he speaks for Hezbollah. He's the Hezbollah big brother. What do you have to say about that?
Well, maybe I'll let you speak to that.
Actually, the framework doesn't require the endorsement of the Parliament. Okay, it's part of our constitution. It's a prerogative of the president, and we are committed to it. And I think the Speaker of the Parliament is really wants to see the end of this war. He's from the south, and he knows he did his best to rebuild the south. But unfortunately, the south being destroyed in front of his eyes. So he's actually supportive of what we are doing, but we need to be careful. His position as a speaker and as a leader of the Shia community, we have to understand how critical is his position. But I can tell you that Speaker Berri is a man of state. He's supportive of what we are doing, and he's supportive of ending the state of hostility, ending the war once for all.
I think when he sees, because I've heard that, he's a good person, good man. And when he sees the progress made, I'm sure he's going to come on.
From NCI TV from Lebanon. I have two questions, please. When will the Israeli army fully withdraw from Lebanon? Is there a clear timeline for that? And last question, please. Last week, you met with the Iraqi Prime Minister and discussed him or described him as handsome and saying he could become one of the best leaders in the Middle East. How do you describe
Which one are we talking about?
the Iraqi Prime Minister? Yes. How do you describe him as a leader?
So I'd say he's handsome also, and I think he could become one of the most important leaders in the Middle East, actually, if we do this, because they've been trying to do this for decades, right? Decades and decades. So if I made that statement about somebody else, I would put him in the same category.
When the Israeli army withdraw from Lebanon, is there a clear timeline?
They're in the process of doing that. They're in the process of redeploying to other sections. And again, they get along very well. That was a great agreement they signed with Lebanon. and they're redeploying.
Mr. President, the Lebanese army needs help, and the United States said that it's very important for the Lebanese army to take over the villages that Hezbollah withdrew from. How are you going to help him, and how the CENTCOM is going to be
speaking about that today.
Ensure
Yeah.
that you'll be in the
We'll
south.
be
as
speaking
well.
about that today with your president, and we have some very concrete plans already in store for that, with others going in and helping. But they're also becoming much more self-sufficient. And we will be speaking about that. That's one of the subjects we're going to be talking about.
My question is, sorry, Israel, the Lebanese army said today that Israeli forces opened fire in proximity to the Lebanese trying to deploy in one of these pilot zones. This is day 2 of the pilot zones. Are you prepared to take any steps, additional steps to put pressure on Israel to withdraw, which I believe President Aoun is planning to ask you?
Well, look, I just heard about that before this conference just happened, and we'll be looking at that, yeah.
Mr. President, there are no signs that Iran is ready to stop fighting. So what is the plan? Is the plan to just keep bombing until they give up?
There are no signs. What, do you know something that I don't know?
Well, they continue to attack our allies and
You
kill
don't know
Americans.
what the dialogue is behind the scenes, that they want to meet desperately to try and end it because they're getting decimated. You don't get that when you listen to your fake station, but you don't know. You don't know anything.
So talks are
You know
still
something that I
possible,
don't know? Do you know something I don't know?
Well, tell us.
I will tell you, they want to desperately meet. And until they're ready to meet in a meaningful way, we have no interest in even.
Mr. President, are you planning on putting any pressure or consequences on China for what you announced about them meddling in the 2020 election?
Well, we're going to talk to them about it. It took place a long time ago. I think China's maybe a little bit different today than it was then. But look, they do things and we do things to them. I'll be honest. We do things to them too. It's not a one-way street. But we'll be talking to them, yeah.
Mr. President, it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but the Border Patrol recorded 14 consecutive months, no releases at the southern border. This is something you talked a lot about on the campaign trail, that you couldn't run on the job that you did on the southern border. Do you feel similarly at this point in time with midterms, considering how well of a job you've done? What is the lesson to be learned about Border Patrol?
Well, thank you for that question. The fact is, and maybe it pertains a little bit with respect to you and borders and everything else, we had a border that was totally out of control. I probably won the election, at least partially, on the border, would you say? And the border now, we literally in 14 months, I think it came out this morning, actually, it was just announced that in 14 months, we had nobody coming through, zero people. I have to send millions came through, and we had 0 people come in illegally into our country. And that's made by people that happen to be Democrats, largely Democrats, the people that do those stats. And I'm sure they don't like saying it, but we really had virtually nobody coming in, and actually say nobody, not even virtually. So it's amazing what's happened there. And very people talk about that anymore. You know, they don't like talking about that. They don't like talking about Venezuela, where we lost no people. I'll be going to Dover for something that I feel it's a great honor for me to do it. These are people that want it, and they feel like I do, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. It's a very simple dictum. They cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have. They have no chance of having a nuclear weapon. And as far as Iran is concerned, I'll let Pete maybe say a couple of words, but we are doing very well. We are degrading them at levels that nobody thought was possible. They're being degraded really so seriously. They did slip something through in Jordan, and if we had other operators, would not happened, unfortunately. But because we have the best equipment in the world, we've stopped almost everything. But when you let other people do your job, with the United States, we let other people do the job, and sometimes it doesn't work out so well. But we're going to be going and paying our respects at Dover. Pete, would you like to say just how we're doing, generally speaking?
Well, it'll be an honor as well to join you at Dover to recognize these incredible Americans who committed to the cause just like you are. Something no president's been willing to do. 47 years, they build up a conventional capability like the North Koreans did. Remember, that's how North Korea made their way to a bomb. So much weaponry that no one was willing to stand up to them. President Trump was, and it continues to this day. Iran's been given every opportunity to negotiate, to show that they're reasonable on the Strait of Hormuz. But if they're going to shoot at commercial shipping, then we're going to hit them, as the president said, 10 times harder, which every night we're degrading them further and further. And the president has all the options necessary. If they want to talk, they can talk. Otherwise, they can deal with the War Department, and we're prepared to
And the
do that.
blockade is up and fully, I mean, it's, nobody gets through. Nobody gets through the blockade. It's like a steel wall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, there was another attack on an ICE facility, this time in New York City. What, in your view, is prompting these attacks, and do you have a message for those who are attacking ICE?
You're talking about the fire that was set in front of the federal building? Well, this is what's happening with the people that they allowed to come into our country. They shouldn't have allowed them to come in. They shouldn't be here. They're radical lunatics. And I'm getting them out. You know, we're getting them out at a pace. You know, we've gotten rid of more than any other president. I read stories, they try and give you phony stats. I was with Tom Homan this morning. He'll give you the statistics if you want, but we're getting bad people out of our country at levels never seen before. There's never been a time when more bad people, and you take a look just here in Washington, we took out almost 5,000 hard-line, hardcore criminals, most of whom came in during the open border periods of the previous administration. An amazing statistic, and this is something that I hate to be talking about in front of the president of Lebanon, but he's got his problems and they're different problems, but we don't have any problems in Washington, D.C. We've wiped out about 92% of the crime, and we're going to get very close to, I believe we're going to get close to 100% of the crime. And if you take a look at this city and compare this to what it was 15, 16 months ago, this was a dangerous city. I don't know how, I better not compare it to Lebanon because I don't exactly have your stats, but it might have been Lebanon was safer. This was a dangerous city under the previous administration, Biden, and now it's a very safe city. There was an article that came out 2 days ago that Washington, D.C. has made the greatest progress of any city in the nation. Now, Memphis also, and New Orleans also. And if they would ask us for help in Chicago, we would turn that around so fast. If they'd ask us for help in New York, we would turn that around so fast. Los Angeles, we would turn that around so fast. But the stat that's so amazing is that 2% of the people create 91% of the crime. Think of that. It's a great stat. Because if it was 70% of the people, that's a problem. It was 20%, 2% of the people create 91% of the crime. Think of that. 2% of the people, you can handle that easily. So Washington, D.C. is now one of the hottest cities in the country. We have the hottest country in the world, but Washington is now hot. And I do have to say one other thing. We just had the World Cup, as you know very well. And it was the most successful World Cup ever. We didn't even have a protest. We had no crime. With all those events, was like having many, many Super Bowls. Each one was like a Super Bowl. And with all of that, we didn't have crime. We didn't have bedlam. Everybody left here with a different opinion than what they read in the fake news. They love this country. I saw Scotland. I saw Norway. I saw all these countries. I mean, the level of love that nobody wanted to leave. And I just want to congratulate everybody, the job that we did, and all of us, everybody in this room, because everybody in this room was involved. The vice president was very much involved. It was amazing. I was with Johnny the other day. The job he did is great, but he said he never thought in a million years it could be so free of any difficulty. Think of it. We didn't even have a protest. Not only no crime. Now, there's a reason for all this, but part of it was that people just wanted to pull together. This country, for like a 4-week period, just pulled together. Really amazing. And I didn't want to say it before the final. I didn't want to say how well it was doing. I wanted to get the final up with, because you never know. It only takes a bad moment. But we just had the most successful World Cup in history. Did 5 times the business of any World Cup in history. And I can't wait to get them back, but I think we won't be able to get them for the next time.
especially with this upcoming, do you feel safe? Especially considering the attempts on your life?
I feel safe. Why wouldn't I feel safe?
President, I'm Pedro Ghani from Al Jadid. Are you still speaking with Hezbollah? You said in previous interviews that you're speaking with Hezbollah.
I say that, but I would speak to Hezbollah. Yeah. I speak to everybody. I'll speak to people that a lot of people think I shouldn't be speaking to, and things work out. I would
Mr. President,
I would say this: if the president wanted me to speak to Hezbollah, you know, he's lived with Hezbollah for a long time. And if the president wanted me to speak to Hezbollah, I would. You know, I would.
All right. So those are some of the main quotes we got in regards to Iran. Obviously started talking about more domestic thing towards the end, but Trump says we're going to help Lebanon a lot. Lebanon has been hit hard for many decades. Our relationship is very good. He said on the Houthi blockade, we're going to see what happens. He also said if something happens, we'll just have to take care of business. The other big thing he said is that Iran wants to meet. Now, he has been saying this for a while, and Iran has not confirmed that they actually want to meet. Micron, right, they're still holding 952. A lot of these names not really taking a hit, even with Trump talking. NVIDIA, which is now confirmed, those Bloomberg reports about their new Vera processors. They just put out a tweet confirming it. NVIDIA right there, that's up about 1.54%. You got SoFi up 2.5%, Broadcom up 2%, AMD up 6% here. Again, if Iran actually wants to meet is up in the air, but Trump saying that might get the market to think that there is a better chance for a ceasefire. I mean, it's better than Trump saying we're going to bomb the crap out of them. Like, he could have said that, or he could say they want to meet. So maybe some inclination of them wanting to meet can be good to get oil prices come down, which oil prices are down 84.50 to now 84. So they've come down about 50 cents. Meta 648. Klarna on that Apple partnership. Again, I still don't really get the partnership. I think it makes sense, but Apple already has a lot of creative financing options. So I would imagine this is expanding to a bunch of different people. And it's good for Klarna, for Apple, if there's anything that can help supplement their demand and get people their products, that makes sense. But that announcement got Klarna the pump. Apple right there, 328, as that is also flipped green. I mean, you know, things are looking okay today. The question is, yeah, usually around 1:30, 2 p.m., we start to see the drop-off. If we see it again today, it's just going to be comical at this point, given how green we've been for the past 2 hours. Software and hyperscalers are down today, but everything else, Coinbase, Robinhood, OSS, DigitalOcean, Klarna, Rocket Lab, even Rocket Lab, look at that 5% move on Mr. Rocket Lab. It was at 69.30. Nebius, nice 12% move. CoreWeave, CleanSpark, Hut, I ran all of them have continued to hold on here. All right, I think that's what we got. I'm seeing some option flows come in. Wow, Micron, 60 million of bullish option flow coming in today, 2 hours into the day. NVIDIA is number 2, SanDisk is number 3, Tesla's number 4. NVIDIA getting about 18 million of bullish premium, SanDisk 16 million, Tesla 14 million, TSM is 5th at 12.5 million. S&P 500, 747.60. We did touch 748, up almost 1% on the S&P, which is a relatively solid, solid day if we can actually hold on to it. All right, folks, I think that is what we got for today. We will be back on the market close. SanDisk up 11% right there. We will have a bunch of earnings. We will have Jason. I think the takeaway so far from today is with all the AI semiconductor deals that were announced yesterday, with the AMD event tomorrow, with the NVIDIA updates today, and the broader sentiment shift around the neo clouds heading back up, obviously memory having a really good day. As long as we keep it towards the end of the day, I think that's bullish. If we give it all back, then at some point, this market is either coiling up to have a big breakout to the upside, or the rejections every day means that we want to go lower. And so by tonight, hopefully we'll have a better understanding of what's going on. Okay, word of the day. What do we have? Let's see. for word of the day. Do you think Meta and Microsoft will be fine? I think they will be absolutely fine over the coming years. It's just if the semis start to really crank back up, unfortunately, Meta and Microsoft might take a hit. But now that Meta's getting into the compute game, maybe that changes. So their earnings over the next few weeks is going to be very important. Apricity. The warmth of sun during winter, especially when it's particularly comforting. After a freezing morning walk, the apricity on the park bench was enough to make him stay a little longer. What happened to the stock market use cases of these words? Why are they used to give me all these like words that mattered when it came to markets. Why is it why is it changing? Yesterday was something about relationships. Today, apricity. There you go. Apricity is our word of the day right here. Let's see how this sounds. Apricity is how to pronounce this. Let me pull up the website that shows what it looks like. Okay, there you go. Is Steve live? Should we spam Steve with this word, apricity? Altman telling you to go outside. That might be exactly what's happening. That might be exactly what's happening right here. Okay, let me pull this up right here. I think we're going to use this word to spam our boy. That might be what we got.
Apricity. A-pre-C-T.
All right, that's what we're spamming for Steve. I will link his stream right here as he is live right now. I don't think Steve knows what apricity means, but